work and screw everyone else in the house. Like, okay.
My dad's pretty tech savvy, so that's good.
That's nice. Mine is not. He's not tech savvy. He's like which as a radiologist is absolutely insane to me because he relies on tech a lot.
Yeah. My dad was kind of tech savvy only because my first computer, an old Apple computer. It was like I had instructions. I had disk instructions how to use a computer, so I gave him a test run. He knew, and he learned the basics at least.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
But speaking of tech and humans and stuff, welcome to Talking Time with Caffeine, the only podcast where we talk about stuff and we discuss stuff.
Stuff and things.
Returning for the first time since October because of her busy schedule. It's Erica.
It's great. Oh my gosh, it has been that long. Here we're talking about Australopithecines and basically like the late Miocene, early Pliocene hominins today, I believe. Yes, is that the plan?
Yeah, anything since we branched off from the pan, genius.
Yeah, that's it. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted to, because I know you're doing this kind of stepwise, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to, like, the Paranthropines, because they're robust Australopithecines, or if you wanted
anything really. There's so many topics, primates we can talk about in the hominins and all the primates. We could like 20 episodes of primates alone of each branch.
That's a good point. You know how to suck up to me, Vandalia, because I love. Go ahead, Walker. You were about to say something, and
I was just going to say that I'd say Paranthropines probably fit in just as much as any other lineage. Yeah, it's hominins.
That's probably true. I'm going to leave. I mean, I don't know how we want to do that.
That's how much time we have, of course.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I kind of beefed up my old human evolution PowerPoint, so I've got that. If we want to reference anything, I've got all my visuals ready if we need to.
Visuals are always good. Pictures to go with our words, always nice.
Go ahead.
Start real fast. I was wondering, so is it official? Were you approved? Are you an official master of the universe now?
Oh my God, I wish. No, I'm still waiting on my external examiners, but hopefully within this next week or two, depending on how my external advisors feel about hopping on the good foot on that, we'll get that master's approved. Especially because I start my PhD in the fall, so I really need that master's to hurry up and be approved.
My marks. Doctor to your master first.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I mean, and plus, I don't know. I submitted that master's. I submitted my thesis like a month and a half ago, so it's like I'm thinking about it, and I'm like. So I refuse to revisit it. Like, I will not open that document because I know I'm going to find like a million things I should have changed, a million things I should have said better, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to look at it until I get my marks.
And you just pray and hope that your reviewer isn't as thorough as you are.
Yeah, that's the thing though. I got I think I've told you guys this before, or maybe not. But I sent my thesis off to my advisor. A month before my thesis was due, and the day before, less than 24 hours, I get it back from him with all of the critiques that he has. So I got like 2 hours of sleep that night while I was like frantically editing my manuscript. Everyone else had got it back to me, but my advisor was like, he was somewhere with no Wi-Fi, and so when he like literally got back and was like, "Uh-oh."
You mind if he wants to join? You mind?
Oh yeah, of course. I'm fine with it. That looks cool.
Totally.
I'll send the link on Twitter. But yeah, when you do officially do that, I want somebody to have a drawing of Erica in her gibbon form doing the He-Man pose.
That's what I need to. Yeah, I need to doodle that or something because I'm just so ready to get it back. And I've talked to all my other colleagues because we were staggered out in submitting because we all had to redo our projects. So I'm kind of middle of the road. There are some people who submitted before me. Some people I'm sure have submitted now, but submitted after me. And we were all like, who's got like how long does it take before you get your marks? And I've got some people who got it like within a month, and I've got some who are still waiting, just like me. So I have no idea when I'm finally going to get my grade. But I'm hoping it's a passing one. That's all I care about at this point. If it could be like the 1 point to not passing, I don't care. As long as I pass now.
As long as you get that, as long as you're D and non-F, you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how master's grading systems work, but C's get degrees, so.
It's master's grading. It's UK master's grading. So like they've got all this weird stuff where like a 70 and up is like a high pass, like you pass with honors, and then a 60 and up is like medium pass, and then a 50 and up is like you just did pass, and you don't want to get below a 50. So it's like it's really weird. I don't know. Don't ask me about it. I was there for 9 months. I still don't fully understand.
That is fair.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. They totally do.
Publishing is hard.
Yeah, the thing is too is that it's like you write something and you're like, this is really good, and then you get some other eyes on it and they're like, steaming pile. Here's all the things you need to change, and you're like, it was so obvious. Why didn't I see it?
So I guess we should start at the beginning. What was the cause for our to say goodbye to our chimp and bonobo pan cousins?
Oh wow, yeah, that's a good question. It kind of depends on who you ask. I mean, ultimately that split occurred because of geology. It was a tectonic shift. The Eastern African Rift Valley Formation is ultimately what split that population. And as Walker, I'm sure, and Nestleg will both sympathize that next part coming out of the trees, and whether we're coming out of the trees as a suspensory adapted primate or an arboreal quadruped, or even if we descended as an arboreal quadruped and then move around as a knuckle walking quadruped before moving into that bipedality, that's the big question right now. I've heard hypotheses or theories that our ancestors were always bipedal, and then the other ones became more quadruped.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking about the same hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, where like the ancestral of the common ancestor of all great apes, the orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and us, were all like arboreal, but we stood upright in the trees with our hands up above us. So we had a upright posture. Not necessarily bipedalism on the ground, but then from going bipedal in the trees to bipedal in the grounds is an alternative way to the knuckle walking stage.
Yeah,
yes.
Walker's professor, one of the folks at his uni, actually.
My minor advisor.
Yeah, released a paper somewhat recently about suspensory adaptation and evolution, human evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So
the question though is very important. It has a lot of bearing on like not just the evolution of humans, but also the evolution of gorillas and pannins, because these guys are both knuckle walkers to this day. They both have that ability to lock their knuckles when they're moving about on the ground. And if it is the case that we descend from a suspensory adapted primate, right? Because we're more closely related to the pannins than they are to the gorillas, then what we're looking at here is two separate emergences of knuckle walking, two different states. Pannins after our split, and one for gorillas and their kin.
It's the phylogenetic bracket hypothesis. Like if you look at two basally derived lineages, and if they share some traits, that you can presume that they are probably plesiomorphic,
right,
present in the ancestor. Then, but of course, that there are some caveats with that, with perhaps convergent evolution, maybe. That's an alternative explanation for this. Yeah, and I think that's also interesting to note that there are some distinct differences in the way chimpanzees knuckle walk as opposed to gorillas. But of course, the defense of the knuckle walking ancestrally is then, but maybe the difference occurred later on, but the ancestor was still knuckle walking by itself. So yeah, it's also weird. It's the only way we could really say one or the other is with just more fossils of the early beginnings of the hominid.
Which is hard because the Miocene hates apes.
Right.
Well, the Miocene loved apes, but the fossil preservation of apes is a different story.
Yeah, it's an interesting one too, because when you look at the climate of the Miocene up in Europe, this area where the apes were just really thriving, it really could lend itself to this suspensory adaptation versus as a knuckle walker, because this adaptation would have allowed these animals to come down similar to how gibbons do it and meander across these kind of dry woodlands on 2 feet, albeit somewhat awkwardly, but they could have done it. I mean, gibbons, again, they do it today, and they've got that really divergent toe in the back. But you know, we start this journey kind of as far as what is conventionally accepted right now with the classic Sahelanthropus chilensis.
Is that where you started off in your game? You're playing occasionally.
Yeah. The Atomai. Actually, that game starts off with an ambiguous pre-split. Who we don't have yet. I mean, the record for the Pannons, for example, the fossil record for the Pannons, horrible compared to the hominins, because the area that they're living in this heavily forested kind of jungle on the other side of the Eastern African Rift, it doesn't lend itself to preserving fossils very well. We run into the same problem once Southeast Asia starts, get past Australopithecus. You start getting into these areas with Gigantopithecus and early gibbon relatives where you're barely finding anything out there. Nothing would fossilize. The soil's too acidic. On top of the fact that you're dealing with a jungle environment where, taphonomically speaking, stuff is just getting carried all over the place. And compare that to these nice savannas where for whatever reason we get a decent preservation. I mean, the hominin fossil record is surprisingly good, and I don't think people appreciate that enough. Like, yes, it's spotty. All fossil records are spotty, but the hominins do pretty well as far as what we've got in this line. Yeah, that's therein lies.
This is an image that I've seen regarding the alternative hypothesis, like where the ancestors were up in the trees with their hands in the air, just like they don't care, right? But and then all the other apes just went their own way. Like we stayed upright on the ground, and the orangutans just stayed more or less in the trees. Of course, occasionally they come on the ground, but the orangutans really love staying in the trees. So please don't destroy their homes, please. Right?
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That's this alternative hypothesis is kind of. I mean, I would. You've almost got decent support for it now. Like, it's almost a nice competitor to this idea of coming to the ground and knuckle walker first.
So do we know if this is a time of where the Sahara was actually green and stuff, or is this?
It alternated back and forth quite a bit, actually. It was going back and forth. I think the period for it was like 100,000 years or so.
For the swap, today is it not 20,000? Is it 20,000? It might be 100,000. I don't know. You would know more than me, Walker.
Oh, well, probably not. But it's either way. It's on the scale of thousands of years, and we're talking about a process that occurred over 8 to 10 million years. So it was definitely going back and forth, and that may have been a cause for speciation and adaptive radiations and stuff like that.
Yeah, that especially too the oscillation of the Sahara from this arid, uncrossable desert to something that could be considered lush in comparison is facilitated or limited the ability of hominins to leave Africa, right? Crossing that area and getting up and out into Europe after the Miocene kind of starts to wind down and you lose the apes up in Europe. This is what's going to allow them to either leave or not. Crossing the Sahara is hard enough as a big-brained, extant member of genus Homo. It's not going to happen very easily if you're, sporting 500 cc's as a gracile Australopith, right? And yet, early Homo somehow managed to do it. We know they did
at least three times.
Yeah, we know they managed to do it. So whether they waited until this was a kind of a lush period for moving up and outwards or not, maybe they braved the desert. We don't really know yet. That's the cool part about
somebody go ask them.
Yeah. Nice. That'd be nice.
one of the reasons why the human line fossils are more common is because, like most of the apes stayed in forests, right? Like the more acidic ground, that's really bad at preserving fossils. But could also be another reason why, like perhaps we just tend to look for human fossils as opposed to the ape fossils, or the other ape fossils. Yeah.
So that's actually a really interesting question. That's the topic of my research. So I'm researching essentially biases in the fossil record, and the causes and how they affect inference, essentially. Yeah. So yeah, the answer is I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Keyword yet. I'll be able to get back to you in a few months.
I think it's both. Because like we also have the same thing with dinosaurs. Like every few weeks or every week, actually, we have a new species of dinosaur, but we wait for a long time for a non-dinosaur to appear. Suddenly, wow, something new that is not a dinosaur.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
we are a narcissistic species, I think, and we like big lizards. So we see. Dapper would be so upset if I called that. If you hear me call that sort of big lizard.
Hey, so what we're on this thing? Do we know? I know you did videos on this like a few months, almost a year ago now, a few months ago. But do we? I know genetics is hard to trace in fossils, but do we have any idea where in that 6 million span that the fusion 2 chromosome happened?
Your guess would be as good as mine. I mean, we know it had to happen after the Pannon split, right? Because
it could actually have happened before, because when, like in the ancestral population, you can have the fused chromosome like lingering around in the population, but when the population split, the fused chromosome got fixed in one lineage and lost in the other lineage.
Yeah,
incomplete lineage sorting is also possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, it's okay, then I'll rephrase. Somewhere around that split.
Yeah. Well, the problem with a lot of genetic mutations is we can count up the number of differences between two different species, right? And use that as an estimate to estimate divergences. But we can't look at a specific mutation and estimate when that mutation happened. It's more about the quantity of differences rather than obviously it is the specificity of differences when you're building phylogenetic trees, but it's impossible to just estimate when specific differences occurred. There's a substitution. Yeah. I was just going to say, for instance, there could be a substitution on some gene that happened, 300,000 years ago before the last common ancestor of humans, or it could have happened, 6 million years ago. And there's no way we could know when that nucleotide swapped around.
Yeah, perhaps you could use the telomeric sequence and see how much it has deviated from the original.
That's true. It could be dated.
Although perhaps it is a bad idea, because the telomeric sequences could have been sub-telomeric sequences from the start, because of course you don't have an end-to-end fusion, you have your ribosome translocation, and most of the telomeres were lost, but then only the ends of the sub-telomeric regions, which were already deviating from the normal TTA-GTG pattern from the beginning. So from that you might overestimate the age, perhaps. Yeah.
We've got the DNA for Neanderthals and Devonisans. Do we know if that combination is in them too?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, they were. Yeah.
So we know what happened before then. Pretty much.
Yeah. Right.
So somewhere between either just before the split or before the split between us and the Neanderthals and Denisovans. Yeah. Other Denisovans were. I don't think we have direct evidence of Denisovans, the chromosome 2, but they were closer to the Neanderthals, so they would have probably have them too.
So we've narrowed down a little bit.
Oh, really? Do we have chromosome 2 from Denisovans too?
Oh. I mean, I haven't looked at that specifically, but we do have full genome sequences. So I would assume that would include chromosome 2.
All right.
So we narrowed down just a little bit.
Yeah.
Now next we need Homo erectus.
Yeah.
And then
Heidelbergensis as well. Yeah. Oh yeah, that'd be incredible. It would be really nice to have some of those. I think they have attempted pulling DNA from Homo floresiensis. They've tried that.
It didn't work.
Yeah, it did not work. They went for a molar, I believe. They drilled into a molar. But they were also thinking that maybe, this was several years ago, so maybe we can try with better tech. The problem is you really don't want to destroy too many of those molars. You don't have any of them. I mean, this story begins a long time ago, and there's so many details that we don't have narrowed down. That's the cool part of it. I think we can at the very least say that when we're starting with Sahelanthropus and moving forward, we're dealing with something that is at least sometimes spending time upright. We've got that nice foramen magnum at the base of the skull that's oriented in such a way that really is something that's probably moving about with its head held at the top of the vertebral column. And there's been some recent work that has come out recently, Macchiarelli et al. Versus kind of Guy et al. with dealing with that potentially Sahelanthropus chilensis femur, medial femur. And I don't know that I buy it. This is my personal opinion, but I don't think that we can attribute that femur with any confidence to Sahelanthropus, particularly because it's found quite a ways away, and it definitely looks more like some of the other Miocene apes that are lurking around at that time. And it's all fine and dandy, if you want to look at this cross section of this kind of middle of the femur and say, oh wow, like this looks a lot like something that we would see with the chimpanzee. Therefore, this is not even a habitual biped. But that doesn't do anything to kind of
attribute it.
It's not even that. It doesn't deal with the foramen magnum at all. Like if you read Macchiarelli et al., they don't talk about the position and angle of the foramen magnum at the base of the skull, which we have. So I don't think that you can, with any confidence, say that this femur belongs to whoever the skull belongs to Tomai. But that's my opinion, and I've talked to some anthropologists about it, some biological anthropologists, and the sentiment tends to be the same, at least with the ones that I've talked to, where they're like, look, whoever owns the skull, we're moving around upright a lot. Whether it's in the trees or on the ground, we can't say. But this isn't going to be something that's an obligate quadruped, like what we see a lot with extant apes. The deal with that femur just gets that femur is just it's kind of throwing a monkey wrench, if you will, into the whole. We can't even for sure say who it belongs to.
Yeah, but I thought that the evolutionists were accepting everything blindly from the scientist. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I do love to see. I also love that some of our mutual friends like to say that me personally, my favorite hominin is actually quadruped, and it's like no one's been paying attention. My favorite hominin is Ardipithecus ramidus, not Sahelanthropus chilensis. So, and even then, we're waiting on that acceptance because Guy et al. It's a pre-release, right? Being reviewed in Nature, his response, where he's like, hey, let's consider the femur alongside other attributed specimens. We can't take it in a vacuum, which is what Macchiarelli et al. did. They took that cross-section, they did an excellent comparison to a bunch of other hominins and hominids and hominids, but they didn't consider it with all of the other material, why they did that, I don't know. I don't know why they didn't consider them all together. I don't think that it belongs to Sahelanthropus, but I'm also not an anthropologist.
Yeah.
So
me and Walker joked about this before you got on, but so what's those species were on the ark? What's those?
Yeah, that's a question. I do love the argument about who is an ape and who is a hominin. It's like asking, this is the classic. It's like asking who is the canid and who is the dog. It's silly and it's a dumb.
It's the best way to determine how transitional a transitional species is.
Yeah, I love the phrases are still around in a million years or so. I love to say, this is the Chihuahua kind. This is the poodle kind.
Yeah. So we got Sahelanthropus, and we've got the questions about whether or not this guy is moving around bipedally or even upright, and then you got Auroran. You got Auroran tugenensis, whose name means original man, and Auroran is the next guy kind of on the list, 6-ish million years ago. And this guy, I think we can say with decent confidence is a biped. right? Albeit an awkward one, but you look at the femoral head, because we've got some great femur material from Auroran. And this guy's probably moving around on two. Whether it's in the trees or on the ground, again, is the question, because therein lies the problem. Upright doesn't necessarily mean terrestrial biped.
So were we still like, were we omnivores at this point, herbivores still, or are we going the carnivore route yet?
Well, we go back and forth, but as far as obligate omnivory, we, generally speaking, Ardipithecus ramidus, who is in between Auroran and your Australopithecines, is pegged as an omnivore. But then the Australopithecines, both gracile and robust, you're seeing some heavy herbivory and from these guys. A lot of the microwear of these teeth, especially for Paranthropus. I mean, these guys just have these megadont molars in the back, and they're sitting around all day grinding up their food to the degree that they've actually got a mandible adaptation where they grind from side to side instead of up and down like we do.
I would like to think that they are the pandas of the hominins, because they don't eat bamboo, at least I think, but they eat mostly vegetation.
Yeah. Tubers, sedges, grasses. I mean, they're sitting around in all likelihood, they're sitting around all day long and eating like nothing but the gracile Australopithecines, who take this a different direction and are, in all likelihood, primarily frugivorous, but with opportunistic omnivory. I mean, we're pegging them as something more similar to our extant panins.
Yeah, that was my next question. You mentioned it earlier. What's the difference in the split between the robust and the
gracile Australopithecines?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
the jaw robustness, the size of their molars, just how heavy set their skulls were, stuff like that.
You got a nice sagittal crest on these on a lot of these paranthropines, and that sagittal crest is for the anchoring of the temporalis, right? So you've got these really massive jaw muscles, and they're not for doing anything but chewing grasses, sedges, and tubers, which again you can tell by looking at the microwear on their teeth. They've got these nice slicings and pitting patterns, very similar to what we see with gorillas, but like gorillas, the thinking is that they probably preferred the delicious sweet fruits when they could have them, but were fallback species. So when times were rough, they could indeed process these grosser, drier, but very, very robust and consistently around foods. Mm-hmm. My favorite hominin is me.
Is there like maybe an explanation of why we have the split between the gracile and the robust Australopithecines? Maybe is there like a sort of niche partitioning happening there?
It's probably climatic change, and it's probably going to be we get this massive change in the Paranthropines, who are consistently later than the Australopithecines. I mean, Paranthropus. All of the Paranthropus species were contemporaneous with members of genus Homo, which is incredible. So some people propose, the big question, of course, is from whom did Paranthropus split off, right? Was it the likes of Australopithecus anamensis? Was it something earlier? Or was it as late as Australopithecus afarensis and africanus? We don't know. That's, again, the cool part, but the gracile Australopithecines go extinct, at least according to current
because that's the one sad part about this big game, this big Hunger Games we had in Africa.
I know. Sorry, Walker.
I was just going to say that the idea of niche partitioning being a primary driver in the evolution of, Paranthropines and early genus Homo. Yeah, that's a very well established idea in paleoanthropology. He keeps coming up. Professor Strait, my minor advisor, he's one of the ones that was doing the work on Paranthropus teeth and their diet, and he was the one figuring all that stuff out. And that's basically his position. So, it's a pretty well-supported position for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting deal. I mean, we tend to forget that a lot of the hominins were living contemporaneous with one another and exploiting different resources. That's the name of the game. And it used to be a much more crowded place in Africa on these plains.
And depending on how far apart they were, that might be interbreeding with each other.
Yeah. I mean, that's another good question. How much hybridization is going on? You run into some interesting issues with the remains, particularly of the gracile Australopiths, because we've got such a variable species going on here, or a genus, I suppose you would say. The big question, of course, and what I care about is are they sexually dimorphic? We don't know. Recently, some of the most recent work in 2015 has come out. My advisor is of the opinion that they were sexually dimorphic, but some 2015 research came out and was essentially like, all right, if we're comparing Lucy, one of the smallest Australopithecus specimens that we've got, with Katamunu man, one of the largest Australopithecus species that we've got, specimens that we've got, we see what has to be this massive sexual dimorphism. But that's not considering all the intermediate specimens. So what we might actually be seeing is variability temporally, because we can't actually place as it living at the same time literally, right? So you might have these kind of comings and goings of larger body sizes and smaller body sizes across 100,000 years. But they might have been very sexually dimorphic. I mean, depending on how you measure it, you can have them falling in line with humans as slight to moderate dimorphism in body size, or they could fall in line with gorillas at 50%. Males 50% or greater than females, which is pretty intense. But what we do know is that their canines are not sexually dimorphic. That we can say with certainty, which it's not very common that you've got no dimorphism in the teeth and a lot of dimorphism in the body size. Usually these two are linked. But we're also dealing with the hominins, which lost to our heavy canines very early. So maybe if there is dimorphism, it would have lent itself more to this body size and large-scale intimidation rather than the teeth. Which I just love that. I love the teeth, so I'm biased. But
so have we started getting less coarse hair fur at this point, or are we still a little big coarse hair bunch?
We don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, I'm from what I understand, the most recent thinking on the matter is that the Australopithecines were still pretty hairy. I mean, I think the way that they kind of gauge that is in accordance with efficiency on bipedality, because once you get very efficient bipedal locomotion, you start to the organism starts to lend itself more to persistence hunting, which would require efficient and numerous eccrine glands for sweating. So I don't know. I tend to think, I mean, they tend to be pretty hairy, but until we can get, I mean, the hair doesn't preserve, right? So until we can get some good genetics, good question.
So I heard, at least in the videos, at least the old history videos, that eventually we started eating bone marrow.
That's going to be later, probably.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is that, your Australopithecus members, and I'm speaking about the gracile ones. I know I tend to, I don't know how you guys feel, but I tend to be like, if I'm talking about robust Australopithecines, I'm like, it's Paranthropus.
Yeah, so, for sure.
We're not the robust ones. We're the others.
Yeah, we're gracile. Yeah, we're gracile.
I keep on trying to say. I keep on say gentle.
Well, that's pretty much what it means.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's you've got like these much lankier organisms with very kind of slender jaws, at least in comparison. And you see them, you don't think they're slender, but
it is something you wouldn't expect. Like the stereotype is that the vegan is like really like meek and small, and if like the meat eater like really buff and strong, but it's the other way around.
Yeah, in reality, the Paranthropines were basically
expectations. Expectation, reality.
I wouldn't want to run into a Paranthropine. No. Like if you're seeing these guys out in, I mean, these are guys that the males probably could have clocked you and killed you. I mean, they are heavy set animals. And beefy boys, large absolute units of hominins. And then you've got our poor little piddly gracile Australopithecines are wandering around, scavenging. And I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I think we've got pretty solid support that these guys are using at least tools on the level of pannins, associated scrape marks on some bones and things like that. So they're the kind of guys that are walking around eating fruit when they feel like it. Ticks hair loss, we'll take it. Yeah, the hair loss is an interesting one. What do you guys think about the What do you guys think about the reason for hair loss?
I found this paper a few days ago. I think it's be interesting. Like there is a hypothesis that the ancestors they had really bad parasites like ticks, for example, and then the chimpanzees solved the problem by excessive grooming, but we solved it by losing our hair, or most of our hair at least.
That reminds me. Speaking of ticks, what's that thing about where our head lice is similar to chimps, but our pubic lice is similar to gorillas?
Oh, yeah.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
Erica?
Implications is a bit embarrassing, although perhaps not. Hopefully not.
I don't think it's necessarily embarrassing, but
that's an interesting one. I don't really know what to make of that. That tail is a bit grotesque in the sense that how we're acquiring these different types of body lice. If you want to, my memory is poor on this one, Walker. Do you want to take it?
Well, so the idea is essentially that there are two species of lice that inhabit human hair, right? You have the head lice or crab lice, and then you have like pubic lice. And phylogenetically,
I thought the pubic lice were the crab lice because they are called.
Oh wait,
crabs,
yes, you're right. Sorry,
yeah, right.
sorry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But so you would expect that either these colonization events happened after these different lineages diverged, so there wouldn't necessarily be correlation between hominid phylogeny and these hair lice phylogeny, or the opposite hypothesis would be these they were ancestral, right? We inherited the lice essentially from our ancestors, and then you would see a matching of the different species of lice with the same pattern of humans. Well, not necessarily humans, all hominids. And interestingly, so it does match the phylogeny, essentially. You can overlay the lice phylogeny with hominid phylogeny. It matches quite well. But there's one anachronism there, and it's that the human head lice matches the chimpanzee. But the pubic lice is actually a sister lineage to gorillas. So it sort of opens the question as to how we got pubic lice from gorillas.
like were we always, was it they both always there and it separated, we lost our hair, or was it there later?
It could be something like incomplete lineage sorting, but well, actually no, I don't think it can, because I think the divergence estimate between the pubic lice and gorilla lice is like 2 million years or something like that. So it was something around the time of Homo habilis or paranthropines.
Do gorilla lice also just go all over the body, or just in the same area as in us? Like
so originally, before we did a phylogenetic analysis of these different species of lice, we had assumed that the pubic lice and the head lice share common ancestry that's relatively recently, and they split off whenever humans started losing our hair, right? Because it almost creates two islands of hair for them to inhabit, two separate ecosystems that are relatively difficult to traverse, just because they're not super close. They don't interact too terribly often.
Like a continental drift, or a
it's a sort of an isolating event. Whereas other hominids don't have that divide because they have more hair than us.
I mean, do the lice of gorillas, like the lice that they have, do they only prefer one spot, or do they occur all over the body in them, all over the body?
I don't know. I would assume it's more or less all over the body, but I'm not totally sure. I can't say with any certainty there.
I think
go ahead. Sorry.
I think unlike us, they have more places to roam and are less hairy, less hairy body.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not even that we're less hairy. I mean, we have the same amount of hair follicles, more or less, than the likes of pannins. Gorillas, I believe, are quite a bit hairier than us and the pannins. But our hair is vellus hair. We have very fine hair all over our body.
We see a bug coming out. We could see it more than they probably could.
Yeah, and some people propose that this ability to assess potential mates for parasites is what caused the hair loss. I tend to lean more towards we're living on an open savanna. and we're
It's hot.
doing a lot of resistance hunting. It's hot. We need to sweat. We've got to come up with some way to cope with this intense heat, because there aren't any really consistently savanna-dwelling primates today that are hominoids, right? I mean, we've got you know, Australopithecus that are hanging out, but they kind of deal with it in a different way. A lot of them just seek shade. Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
One could make the argument we already have compared to the other primates. Humans are the sexy ape that has.
You just did a video. You just did a video on our sweat loss like last week. So.
Yeah. Well, water efficient and sweating. I mean, these two things are irreparably tied because of the environment that we're living in. Humans are hominins. We're supremely adapted for our climate, as is typical. Right. You know, instead of seeking shade, though, we tended to just say, you know, screw it, we'll deal with the heat. We'll just sweat.
It maybe has also to do with the fact that we tend to or at least the ancestors tend to did long distance running, pursuing prey over basically just an endurance contest. Eventually they will tire out, but with our sweat, we will stay active for a longer time, and then we can go for the kill, basically.
Yeah, and to that point, we also are better at than any of the other hominoids at preserving water. So even though we sweat our water, we're still more efficient with it. We don't have to consume, or rather imbibe in as much water as our cousins do. So even though we're losing it all over our body pretty much all the time, but especially in heat, we're still better at managing our water. Water efficiency and water management was a huge hominin specialty, especially once you get into genus Homo. I mean, the Australopithecines, we're looking at organisms that are probably still pretty hairy. They're not that good at sweating. Any meat that they're eating, they're probably scavenging or getting quite lucky. And they're still likely spending some time in the trees. I mean, we look at kind of our why do feathers preserve, but it seems like fur doesn't, or am I wrong? I'm wrong, aren't I? I don't know. I mean, I think most of our feather preservation is just really good luck. And you've got 170 million years to preserve some feathers. Like, you've got 7 million years to preserve fur on some of these.
There are some birds that have a few naked spots. Like, for example, the vultures have their entire head and neck basically naked, and that's probably because they get very dirty when they are eating the carcasses right. And also ostriches have their head and neck are naked, but only their wing feathers. They still have wing feathers. Perhaps maybe for a type of sexual selection. But I also have heard that they can cool down using their feathers, basically, too. Like, they can generate air currents to cool themselves down with their wings. So it's maybe also a reason,
I don't think there's a bias towards feather preservation over hair preservation. I think it's a nice sampling bias due to the period of time that we've got. Because we've actually got preserved fur on some of our mammal fossils. You know, we've got Darwinius massilae is a great example. We've got that nice ring of fur on this whole animal. But Darwinius massilae, Ida, fell into a highly eutrophic lake and was preserved at the bottom. Right. Whereas most of the hominins are, you know, falling into pits or being carried into caves or
maybe not. Or maybe they have something.
It's just not conducive to fossilizing any of the fur. We're not seeing that kind of taphonomy in the areas that the hominins are.
Or being carried in giant nests.
About the sweating, we probably lost our hair because of more efficient heat regulation. Like with less hair, you evaporate more of your sweat, and you can cool yourself down more easily than with the thicker fur. But if the paranthropines were not really that active, would that mean that they were more furrier than the grey sole or the grey?
We have no idea.
Yeah,
that's an interesting question for sure.
It could be. It could be. I mean, these guys are sitting around probably and browsing all day. An interesting thing too is that their postcrania is pretty robust, which doesn't really. I mean, that kind of clocks well with what we expect from organisms that require these really complicated hindguts for absorbing
Right.
nutrients from a lot of grass. Like your obligate herbivores, or even habitual herbivores, they tend to have more complicated guts than us monogastrics that consume quite a bit of meat and mostly rely on easy to digest or vegetation like fruits. So
Would the,
okay, sorry.
Sorry. Would the gracile Australopithecines do active pursuit hunting, like running on air prey, or?
Yeah, we have no idea. I'm inclined to believe no, because we're not Australopithecines. While they're fine on 2 feet, and they certainly were bipedal on the ground, these guys weren't knuckle walking. We know that for sure.
Right.
The big bowl-shaped pelvis for a really nice pelvic floor for holding those organs when you're moving around upright. Mostly inline halix or great toe. We're seeing a femoral head that is much more in line with later Homo than anything we see in the Pannons. Valgus knee.
Erica, we totally put that together ourselves. That wasn't a real thing.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. I really do love the answers in Genesis. Australopithecus afarensis as a knuckle walker.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, I mean, golly, that's just such a stretch. I honestly hate that reconstruction with a burning passion, even though it's quite well done.
And
yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm sorry he keeps coming up, but that the paper that they based that on was once again by my professor. I asked him, and he said, "No, that's not correct at all. That's very dumb." Because his paper, he's never suggested that Australopithecines were knuckle walkers. He suggested that humans evolved from some sort of knuckle walking ancestor, and Australopithecines retain some plesiomorphic characteristics, like there's a distal ridge essentially that is for when you lock your knuckles when you're knuckle walking.
Yeah,
right.
And that's what they based it off of, this ability to lock the knuckles. And I mean, this would be, I don't even know how you would compare that one plesiomorphic trait versus the suite of apomorphies for this standing upright. Blows my mind. I can't even imagine thinking that Australopithecines were knuckle walkers. No one proposes that.
Okay, I have two questions real fast. One, do we know if any of them left Africa before the Homo genius?
It depends. It depends. Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis are, by some accounts, more Australopithecine-like than Homo-like. There have been buzz in the paleoanthropological community that maybe they should be defined as Australopithecines. And if that's the case, then some Australopithecus must have left Africa at some point. But it could be that they've just got these that they're kind of relic hominins, that they've kind of got these basal traits that were conducive to the area that they lived. We don't know. It's a really good question, but I don't know.
I have heard like a few years ago. I heard like there was one European hominin, at least. But I don't remember specifically what species it was. It wasn't Homo, I think. And I think Arn Ra also mentioned it in one of his videos on the Noah's flood, if I remember correctly.
Maybe. I mean, I'm thinking like when you're looking at dispersal out of Africa, the out of Africa hypothesis, and Walker can correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I know he knows more about kind of the later genus Homo and those dispersal events, but it applies mostly to Homo sapiens. Like Homo sapiens is coming out of Africa as sort of a single group, but there are dispersals prior from other hominins.
Because I know of the we split. I think we split from the Neanderthals and Denisovans when they came out of Africa before us, and then the Homo erectus came out of Africa even earlier, and they lots of splits there.
Yeah, they went all crazy.
The story is a bit. It's a bit more convoluted just because there was so much hybridization, interbreeding back and forth between African populations, Middle Eastern populations, all that kind of stuff. But yes, that is generally considered to be like the primary cause of speciation between humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans.
And also if the hobbits came from the habilis, and that's even another came out thing.
Well, yeah, and then you've got some people who even think Homo habilis and associated species like Homo gatineensis and Homo rudolfensis, that they've got more Australopithecine-like traits too. I mean, you've got to. The problem is the line's got to be drawn somewhere, and because we've got such a gradient, it's very difficult to decide where that is. Generally speaking, you can be a hominin if you've got hints at bipedality, and you've got a reduced dentition, especially those canine, and a more parabolic trending palate, which is why we started at Sahelanthropus as a hominin. Now, what the difference between Australopithecus and genus Homo is becomes even muddier, because you've got Australopithecines that have decently large brains, sort of as we're moving more recently on the timeline, and you've got habilins, quote unquote, that have really small brains. So, and then you've got the whole issue of regional variation and potential for sexual dimorphism, and it becomes a huge muddle with regard to who comes when, right? And you can't really draw this linear pathway as far as so and so beget so and so beget so and so beget so and so. Instead, what we're looking at is this one gigantic transition, right? As traits are moving from the basal suite to the derived suite. And this includes efficient bipedality, large brain case size, the dental arcade, and things of that nature.
You look at these family trees, we go at the split. Like, lots of them are totally different. Hardly any of them agree sometimes. Like, are we connected to this branch or that branch? Do we fluff?
Yeah. One really confident stepwise move that at least my human evolution textbook will make is they feel confident enough to say Australopithecus anamensis probably is in direct lineage with Australopithecus afarensis. And then they will very tentatively link, and I don't know about this one, Ardipithecus ramidus as prior to Australopithecus anamensis, but as eventually moving it down the line. And if that isn't the case, then I am of the opinion personally that the Australopithecines are probably not as dimorphic as we think they were. I think that we know with relative certainty, at least this is what I get from the big head honcho on canine sexual dimorphism in primates, Michael J. Platkin. Ardipithecus ramidus is not dimorphic in its canines. The males and females have decently large canines that project beyond the tooth row, but unlike chimps, which are moderately dimorphic, slightly to moderately in their canines, the Ardipithecine or Ardipithecus ramidus not. Neither is Ardipithecus cadava. And if that's the case, it has huge implications for how we're assessing the Australopithecines, in my opinion. But that being said, sexual dimorphism can come and go relatively quickly. It's not necessarily once it's there forever, or once it leaves, it's gone forever. It's dependent a lot on sexual selection, and preferences change. And those preferences might change depending on the climate. If you're a female and you're living in an area that is, super arid, you might find there's a merit in picking a mate that is good enough at securing resources to be as big as he is.
So
it's much like oh, so go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, it's much like oh, so sorry. There's a delay.
I can say so. Sexual selection was a thing back then in our ancestry too. Maybe.
It's always a thing. Yeah, what Walker said. Sexual selection is always at play. And when we're talking about social species, this is even more so the case. Female choosiness and males competing, that level will switch around. The level to which males are competing for access to females and females are actively choosing their males is heavily dependent on environment. It's dependent on group size. It's dependent on just a myriad of different factors. And we to impose social systems based off of levels of sexual dimorphism. And I don't think that we can do that. I don't know that we can necessarily make that move. Gibbons, for instance, are monomorphic. The males and females look identical, except sometimes they've got pelage difference. The colors of the fur are different. They're super aggressive. These are not peaceful animals. So the idea of imposing on Ardipithecus ramidus that these are the peaceful, monogamous apes is let's see, I want to make stupid jokes on them appearing disappearing still in the male genitalia, coming and going womp womp. Good one, Nestle. And you compare that with like your callitrichins, right? Your modern marmosets and tamarins, who are also monomorphic, and they mate for life. I mean, they're not even socially monogamous. They're like true monogamous, truly pair bonded, and they're really chill.
So we didn't make the walrus journey where we have a big harem of one big male and like all the females go to him.
Well, maybe. I mean, it depends, because some people propose that the Australopithecines were super dimorphic, and they might have been. I am just of the opinion that if you're going to make the link with Ardipithecus ramidus, you're almost making that move that at least with Anamensis, you have, typically speaking, acquiring sexual dimorphism takes longer than losing it. At least that's.
But there also been a cultural element. Like, for example, today with humans, there are also cultures that are like they have polygamy, and some other cultures are like monogamous or mostly monogamous.
Well,
and there's a recent push for polyamory, for acceptance of polyamory too. So,
well, polygamy is also supremely different than one-sex polygamy, polygyny or polyandry. The social conditions to get a polyandrous primate are very unique. That's one female with access to multiple males. And species that twin a lot, like marmosets, one female she'll do paternal confusion, right? So she'll mate with two males, and then both males think that the offspring is theirs. So she's got two males kind of working to keep her happy. And neither male knows if the offspring is his. Then on the other side, you've got polygyny with gorillas, where you've got a harem situation, one male, multiple females. But interestingly enough, in some groups, you've got both. So in geladas, for example, these cercopithecoid primates, they're Ethiopian baboons, essentially. They live on these vast highland plains. You've got multi-level organization. So they live in groups with multiple males and multiple females, but the small groups, you've got one male, multiple females, small harems that compose a larger group. Primates are confusing. They're super social, and they're creating these arbitrary groups and then losing them when the climate changes.
Yeah, with Brainbug here, I was gotta make that thing. I'm just glad we don't have like the arthropods, where as soon as the male mates with the female, it becomes the female's lunch.
Yeah, I'm also quite glad about that.
You don't want to be an arthropod, because when you don't want to be an arthropod male. Usually, if there's
especially not a praying mantis or a spider.
Yeah, a lot of the sexual dimorphism that we see in arthropods favors females. In fact, mammals are unique in that the sexual dimorphism is male biased. So males are typically larger than females in mammals. In the majority of the animal kingdom, this is reversed. You've got, and it has to do with your strategy for reproduction. So if you're a female and you have to lay a lot of eggs, which is the case with a lot of organisms that aren't mammals, you want to be big, right? You've got to be big in order to produce a lot of those eggs. And if you're a male and there's big females, it's usually conducive, conducive to your success to be a bit smaller and a bit sneakier. But that's not always the case. So yeah, I love sexual dimorphism. I think it's really interesting in both ways.
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, out of Africa too?
I have not heard of it. Maybe can you clarify, Lisa?
I mean, is this the idea of like humans leaving Africa two separate times? So you've got Homo sapiens leaving at one point and then leaving again at kind of in a punctuated fashion. Could happen. I mean, I don't know nearly as much about late genus Homo as I early genus Homo.
Maybe she made. I think a long time ago there was this theory about we left Africa after we left Africa once and we went on the East Coast around Australia, and then maybe after the big Toba explosion we left Africa again and went up around again.
Well, go ahead, Walker. You go ahead.
I was just going to say there are anatomically modern humans that lived outside of Africa that actually, I don't know if they necessarily count as anatomically modern humans because, they lived before the last common ancestor of living modern humans, right? But morphologically, they pretty much had all of the synapomorphies and autapomorphies that characterize modern humans. There's some skulls from the Middle East and stuff that have these early modern humans, I guess. I think that's probably the best way to describe them, early modern humans.
Although like the out of Africa, I think it's not really conducive to viewed as one single event. Like for example, I helped with Jack Sweet about a video. I think it's called The Ancestor's Tale, where we talked about how different humans are related genealogically speaking. Like there's actually, that's actually a good like with just simple or complex models of population interbreeding between continental groups. There's actually a really good chance that everybody is descended from one person living in Asia like a few thousand years ago. So there are also humans going back to Africa too. So it's just like one thing going from Africa to Eurasia and you're done. There's always a back and forth between different populations as well.
Back migration. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's, obviously we know that humans interbred with Neanderthals. We still have, introgressive elements in our genome from Neanderthals. And recently in the past 2 or 3 years, the traditional story is like, oh, all humans outside of Africa have introgressive elements from Neanderthals. Within the past few years, we sort of found that even sub-Saharan African populations that you wouldn't expect to have Neanderthal DNA have Neanderthal DNA. And one of the most likely explanations for this is actually back migration, right? So humans would go to the Middle East, interbreed with Neanderthals, and then go back to Africa and, have kids with the people in Africa.
I like the terminology that Concordance uses, the genetic bucket chain, basically passing all the genes from one neighbor to the next and such, and then they will eventually make their way in Africa. So
I just remember I heard that not many of the African people genomes don't have very less of hardly any of the Neanderthal DNA.
Yeah, they have very little Neanderthal DNA. Traditionally, all non-African populations have about 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Sub-Saharan African populations have about 0.3, right? Yeah. And that also is possible that that's statistical noise.
Yeah, they are less ooga booga.
Yeah, but interestingly, though, also the areas that are hypothesized to be introgressive are typically non-coding, which suggests that one of the reasons that most non-African populations carry Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA is because we were sort of just stealing their genes because they were already adapted to Europe and Asia. So that's kind of cool.
Is that a term for it? Like where you basically steal, quote unquote, steal genes that are
it's just called adaptive. Yeah, it's called adaptive introgression.
I've heard that
sapiens move.
I also heard that we have it was more. I think this is right. It was more. I remember it was either more Neanderthal males and female Homo sapiens, or male Homo sapiens and female Neanderthals. Past lineage, I forget which one it was. We had more.
Yeah. Oh crap! I will have to get back to you on that one because I do know the answer. I just can't remember.
I don't know. So yeah, boot that Walker's way. I want to make a quick correction though from something kind of we were saying earlier. Generally speaking, as far as I'm aware, the current literature does not associate the Toba super eruption with the bottleneck in the human population. That was an idea that was tossed around for a while, but when you actually go and you look at the tufts from the volcanic eruption in Indonesia and you associate with populations that were milling about in Africa, you can't make that connection. We can't make it at this point. It could be that it had an impact, but as far as what caused the bottleneck, it's not generally assumed that the Toba eruption is responsible. If memory serves, the current idea for what caused the bottleneck is just the founder effect. It's just people leaving Africa, founding new locations, and kind of inbreeding for a while prior to mixing.
And that's why we have more genetic diversity in Africa than we do the rest of the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Sure. So, that's an interesting one because speaking of the creationists, they do love to talk about the bottleneck. They love this idea. Never mind the fact, this is hilarious to me. Speaking of things about creationists that are hilarious, they love.
They're about genes,
Well, yeah, they love to take conventional ideas and be like, see, this matches what we think, the Carnian pluvial episode, and assigning that to it rained for 2 million years. Look, there was a global flood.
It's the Nostradamus effect.
Yeah,
basically.
but even if it was true, that bottleneck happened 17,000 years ago. Like 17,000 years ago compared to the 4,000 years ago bottleneck. Totally different.
That's exactly the problem. Like with the bottleneck or with the Carnian pluvial episode, we're talking about a period of 2 million years of the global moist climate, and we're talking about a bottleneck that is significantly older than what they need. So,
significantly older than they think the world is.
Right, exactly. So alluding to some event and then being like, see, this works for us, and then applying it to what they think, that doesn't work. Like temporally, it's not possible. So that's why they have to do the whole, radiometric dating doesn't work unless it's carbon dating less than 5,000 years and used to validate the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, where's the line? Where does it stop working, and why does it stop working there? It blows my mind that these people, I mean, listen, this is about hominins. Let's talk about hominins, not the creation.
Yeah.
Much more fun topic.
So since you put all that time making your presentation, why don't you share it?
Yeah, I mean, we can see it. I mean, it's just
I want to make all that work go for nothing.
Well, it's a PowerPoint I've had for a while. I edited it a little bit for this presentation, but I actually made this years ago for a conversation with my IRL creationist colleague. But I can show it. Yeah, I mean, it's just I like the visuals in it.
Yeah.
Also, sorry for presenting. I was presenting the interesting paper or review paper that I found it, and that doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so can you guys see all this?
Yeah, that's great.
All right. It's living hominoids. The key traits to focus on when we're looking at human evolution. We're looking at bipedal locomotion and the different kinds of traits that go with that. This is a great picture for looking at the traits that must change. Head being held vertically, our large bulbous crania, reduced prognathism, a shortening of the lower back, our wide bowl-like pelvis, etc., etc. And then this is a real comparison of the differences between a human skull and the skull of a modern chimpanzee, which they share a lot, but they are different in a lot of ways as well. For one, you've got this really nice, heavy supraorbital ridge or brow ridge for your chimps. We could go on to that for a long time, but I mostly just want to show some of our fossils that we've been talking about. So this is the skull of Sahelanthropus chidensis, brain case size. What we see in chimps, it's got a lot of very classic hominin traits, but it's mostly just a Miocene ape. But the big key is that foramen magnum, as you can see here in the chimpanzee, the angle of the foramen magnum and the location is much more intermediate when we're looking at Sahelanthropus chidensis in comparison to what we see in Homo sapiens. We're going from this acute angle down in chimps to something that is approaching a right angle, still obtuse. And then once we reach Australopithecus africanus or africanus, depending on who you talk to, we're seeing it finally get acute, or finally grow.
What is the angle? What is the angle about? Is it just brain size, or does it what does it correlate to? The angle.
What does the foramen magnum correlate to?
Is this for the foramen magnum? Is this the angle?
Yeah. So the foramen magnum angle and location is related to bipedality. So it's related to how you hold your head when you walk. A foramen magnum that is nice and underneath the skull is supporting this classic upright, right on the top of the vertebral column, the skull, almost like a lollipop, right? And being able to move efficiently with that head being held high on top and bearing the weight directly underneath the skull. And this is kind of a nice way of looking at it. Sahelanthropus has a foramen magnum that is intermediate of chimps and modern humans. Chimps being something that is obligately quadrupedal, and knuckle walking, and modern humans being obligate bipeds. Aurorantuganensis, we mostly just have the femoral head. This animal, we definitely just approximate the brain case size based off of associated species. There's some really great work on the bipedal nature of Aurorantuganensis, and you just have to look at the femoral head, and you can see that this animal is trending towards bipedality. Ardipithecus cadaba, another member of Ardipithecus. I love Ardipithecus. I think it's a great genus rather. And this guy is also going to be a biped. But the interesting thing about these guys and about Australopithecus ramidus as well is they're still holding, let's see if I can find a good picture of it. Yeah, so F down here at the bottom right. These guys are still holding their halix to the side. They've got a super divergent halix. In fact, it's more divergent than what we see in Pan troglodytes, and yet it's still got this foramen magnum that's more that's more ventral, more held underneath the skull, and its hips are more similar to Homo sapiens parts of Pan troglodytes. So what that suggests is that potentially this organism was capable of moving about bipedally in the trees really, really well, and then was somewhat awkward when it was moving bipedally on the ground. But was a biped.
I have a question. Like, given that the Australopithecus has so many plesiomorphic features, is it also possible that the Australopithecus is actually more closely related to chimpanzees? Maybe a possibility, or is it more parsimonious to suggest that it's more closely related to our line?
I think Australopithecus ramidus is definitely a hominin. Now, whether or not it's within our lineage is going to be up for debate.
I mean not directly ancestral. I mean just more closely related to us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I am of the opinion, and it's current conventional thinking, that Australopithecus ramidus is closer to humans than it is to chimps. And the reason is because although it's got this very odd specialized toe, is not necessarily chimp-like. It's unique to both humans and chimps. It's got a very unique way of moving about that we don't really see in any extant organism. So, you know, in my opinion, I mean, the hand is more precision grip, more similar to a human. The bowl-shaped pelvis is more human-like. The way it holds its skull, again, more human-like. And you've also got this reduction in the canine tooth. So I'm of the opinion that Australopithecus ramidus is a hominin and is more closely related to humans than it is to chimps. But there are people who push back on that. There are definitely people who push back on that.
Maybe this goes back to the image I shared earlier, like with the common ancestor living in the trees with the hands up above the head. Could Australopithecus maybe lived like that, with the the opposing helix on the feet, grabbing branches, and then
Yeah, that's the thinking, is that this guy is definitely girl. Actually, Artie is thought to be female, the flagship specimen. But she's moving around in the trees for sure. That back foot, that orthograde posture when it's in the trees, is definitely going to find itself in that divergent halix. That's great for gripping the limbs of the tree while you're moving around.
Yeah.
But that being said,
sorry. So this time we were going on we were on the ground, but we were occasionally going back to the trees for like maybe.
I would argue that we're in the trees and occasionally coming to the ground. I would argue it's the opposite. That Australopithecus ramidus.
Is there any sign of? Sorry, so there's a delay. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Is there any sign that Australopithecus was knuckle walking too? Like maybe perhaps on the ground, when it was on the ground, it was knuckle walking, or?
No, I believe it has the same locking mechanism that we see in the Australopithecines, but it's likely that that's a relic, because this organism, again, it's everything about its setup. It biomechanically speaks to something that holds its weight upright. From the shape of the pelvis, even if it's in the trees, it's moving about upright in the trees. So there is nothing with Australopithecus ramidus that supports, in my opinion, a knuckle walker in particular.
So Australopithecus, it looks a lot like the in the image that I shared earlier with the with the ancestor with the hands above the head. It's more like that. More like that.
Yeah, we're talking a bipedal clamberer.
Yeah.
Something that's moving upright through the trees, very similar to what we see in gibbons and orangs today.
Right,
But not suspensory. So we're not seeing something that's hanging around, like using its arms to actually hang. We're talking about something that is clambering with all four limbs.
So, do we have the ability? Were we tool using at this point?
Potentially, but usually the earliest tools are attributed to the Australopithecines, and depending on how you group Kenyanthropus platyops, which is I don't know. That's a real weird one. This is an organism that is very, very old, potentially contemporaneous with some members of Australopithecus ramidus, is probably using tools, has this orthognathic face that's very flat, and isn't classified as strictly as an Australopithecine. It's a very weird one.
And we were definitely probably still prey at this point.
Oh,
Yeah,
for sure.
probably.
Well,
I mean,
also-
we're still prey now.
Yeah, well, the Turkana boy is Australopithecine, right? Australopithecus africanus.
Turkana boy is Australopithecus africanus.
Yeah, and he died from some sort of bird of prey, right?
Yeah.
So we were definitely still getting preyed on at this point. We were not the apex predators of the savannah.
And yeah, I would even argue that being a mesopredator, like pretty much once you get into the Australopithecines, you're looking at something that is a predator, like much like a fox, right? Like a fox preys on other animals and is also preyed upon.
You remember the very old and faked YouTube video where there was like a baby being carried by an eagle, right? Do you remember that? That was faked, but for Australopithecus afarensis, that was real life.
Well, they're smaller than we are. Most of the Australopithecines are. Humans are kind of big. I mean, we're kind of a big animal. When compared to some of the other apes, we're by no means the biggest, but
are we technically a megafauna? Technically speaking, right? Yeah.
Well, actually, wait, no. The definition for megafauna is anything over 100 kilograms. So I think
yeah.
But I think generally humans are not megafauna.
Yeah. In our ideal form, quote unquote, probably not.
Speaking of Turkana boy, I was watching a documentary a few years ago about him and about the early paleontology of that time, and
right.
They said documentary. I don't know if it was true or not because it might have been elaborate. They said that first the guy who discovered it wasn't like a knowledge for it because that's around the time they had that one find in England, and people were more towards that than they were to the Africa thing.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Walker.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. Go for it.
Oh no, I was just going to say, the origins of humanity being in Africa was a tooth and nail fight. Mostly because people were really racist back in the day. It was really hard to finally get everyone to see that yes, the cradle of humanity is East Africa. We are an ape species that arose in the African continent, and very specifically likely in the east, as far as when the hominins are first beginning, or in central of Chad, seeing Sahelanthropus over there. But climatically speaking, it's very conducive to hominins in East Africa 7-ish million years ago. And then we see this migration down to the south, and in South Africa.
Yeah, there's actually a really funny story about that. The guy who discovered Java Man, I don't remember his name. I think he was some Dutch dude. But basically, he discovered Java Man in he discovered Java Man in like 1908 or something like that. And this was the height of, this was around the time of, what's his name? Piltdown Man. And all that kind of stuff. And so just nobody cared about Java Man at all. Like just no one cared. And he personally thought that it was a super important find, and he was a huge fan of his find and all that kind of stuff. And so out of spite, basically, he buried the original bones of Java Man under his front porch. He's like, okay, if no one cares about it, I'm just going to, put it in concrete. And after Piltdown Man was sort of confirmed as a hoax, people had to go to his house and dig up the bones of Java Man.
Yeah,
you finally came back, huh?
And that's the classic, because Piltdown Man was hoaxed partially because there was this big fight in the paleoanthropological community of in human evolution. What came first? Were we a big-brained ape or a small-brained biped first? Or quadrupedal ape, I should say, or a small-brained biped first. And the answer with Piltdown Man seemed to point to this very prognathous apish face with this big old brain, right? Because it's a human skull, human maxilla, back of the skull too, and then and an orangutan jaw that was then filed to match the proportions needed. And with the likes of Java Man and indeed some of the Australopithecines, what we start to see is we've got this small, diminutive, itty-bitty brained prognathic biped that's wandering around East Africa first.
There's also something that the creationists often overlook is like they say like, oh, Piltdown just fooled the entire evolutionist community, and they will just blindly accept it. But when more evidence came in, we saw more fossils in Africa, and also a different picture in the evolution of humans. So and that is how, and then slowly, even before it was finally determined to be fake. The scientists were still questioning how relevant Piltdown Man was to the human evolutionary story. So it's not like they were. It's not like they were just awing over the Piltdown Man, over the altar. Like they were worshipping over the altar of the museum. Like, but still, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Piltdown Man thing definitely did play into biases, and I've heard people say that it set the study of human evolution back like 20 years or something.
Right.
It definitely prevented us from actually doing good science for a while.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
As the bias was mostly on the I think the British, right? The British. They were like they were mostly all proud of their British ape man, right? Like wow, humans came from the island of Great Britain.
They love that, and the thing is, most of the anthropologists worth their salt too were like, okay, this is really weird. Why is it that someone is proposing the origin of humanity in the UK, climatically speaking, the opposite of conducive to any kind of ape? It's not a good place to live if you don't have the big brain for accommodating these, these.
It's also a bit ironic, like the falsification or the eventual realization that Piltdown Man was a fraud actually proved Darwin right, because Darwin originally proposed that humans came from Africa.
Yep.
So yeah.
And Wallace thought that humans were a sister species to gibbons, actually.
So really?
Wallace was a bit wrong, but Huxley and Darwin were huge proponents of. They were really into the idea that we were African great apes, which is correct.
Yeah. And you can't blame Wallace either, because the posture of the gibbon really does lend itself to the bipedality of humans. I mean, these little critters, they've got really long arms, but when they come down from the trees, they hold their up like this and they walk around on 2 feet.
Really, it's really funny to see them walking.
Yeah, they're very cute.
Yeah, I just hate that they're still using that thing against us. Like, oh, that was a fraud, so all of it's a fraud.
Well, obviously, in real science, no one cares.
No one cares. Literally, no one cares.
It's a historical lesson, right? Like, it's something that's taught about. But at the same time, like, it's not... no one's including, like, Piltdown Man in any studies, No.
Oh my God, no. And the thing is that, like, oh boy, if you want to talk about hoaxes of antiquity, like biblical antiquity, that have existed through the years, I really don't think we want to play the hoaxes invalidate the entire field game, because antiquity is chock full of them. The point is too, like, it's almost Piltdown Man was almost a blessing in disguise, because allowing for this hoax that went kind of under the radar of some paleoanthropologists forced everyone to look at every subsequent hominin with incredible scrutiny. So now we know every fossil that comes through, everyone looks at it with combs through the morphology with a fine-tooth comb. Make sure, give us the in situ pictures. Give us, the process of pulling it up out of the ground.
And that's probably why that one that North America was like immediately like struck down.
No anthropologist thought Nebraska Man was anything but a peccary tooth. The peccary, right, Walker?
Yeah, that's what it turned out to be. I don't think they had any specific identification of it initially, but it was sort of taken and run with by like popular media and stuff like that.
Yeah. Anthropologists up and being like, yes, a hominin tooth. This was randos who kind of picked up the molar and were like, oh, this looks kind of human-like. Which, peccaries are omnivores. So a lot of omnivores have these same low-crowned crushing molars combined with slicing carnassials or premolars.
Yeah, the question is how they. The question was. But how they get to America in the first place? Right now, at that time, only primates in America were the New World monkeys that's wrapped over that point.
Yeah, and you've got some really, really, really old Cretaceous primates as well. Once you get kind of into the Cenozoic, you see some of the early primates popping up in North America. Usually, like mostly adapids and omomyids that are popping up, and then they go extinct, which sucks.
Oh, did the primates first originate in North America?
Yeah.
Like
Although
yeah.
it's iffy. It's
Yeah,
iffy.
we talked about that on our primate migration. That they were you said they were more primomorphs, the pre-primate primates.
Right. It's very difficult to pick the first primate, right? Like Purgatorius was considered for a long time to be the first primate. Some people still think it is. Some people think it's a Plesidapiform. And some people propose that, like, I think it's Ruanguea is in Texas, definitive omomyid. This is definitely a primate, and we've also got some adapids popping up here and there. Yeah. But as first actual primate, things were still kind of crushed together at that point. So it might have popped up in China. It might have popped up in North America. You can't definitively say either way because primatomorphs are so similar to primates. And what we consider a primate occupies that gradient kind of. So
Are you saying they are transitional?
Yeah. Again, like where's that line between primate morphs and primates? Like where's that line between humans and apes? Where's that?
Usually it's just defined phylogenetically.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting to note, when you look at the complete group of placental mammals, it divides into like 3 major groups. Like you have the Afrotheres, which are which originated in Africa. They are the elephants, the manatees, and tenrecs. You have the Xenarthrans. They are in South America, like the sloths, the armadillos, and such, and some anteaters, not all of them. And then you have another group, the big group, the Boreoeutheria, which splits into the Laurasiotheria, where you have like the ungulates and the carnivorans and such. And our group is the Euarchontogliers, which like, if I remember correctly, the Euarchontogliers originated in Europe. And so perhaps the common ancestor of like rodents, rabbits, and primates originate in Europe, but then some of them migrated to North America and then became the primates, perhaps. So maybe one possibility for the primate ancestors.
Yeah, I mean, primates are very close with rodents, ligomorphs, and I think chiropterans too. I mean, genetically speaking, I don't know it's as close as
Chiropterans.
Yeah, the chiropterans are now like they were previously considered close to primates, but genetics, like really, I also
they're very basal though.
Yeah,
they're very basal Boreoeutherians.
I helped Jackson Beat with a video on bat evolution too. Like, and also like we showed how the genetics really changed the position of bats.
Was that the co-op he did with Tony Reid?
Sorry?
The bat evolution, was that the co-op when he did co-op with Tony Reid?
Oh yeah, yes, exactly. That's the one. Yeah. And there's also an interesting idea about the bat evolution. Like the bats basically divided into 2 groups, traditionally speaking. Now not anymore, but they were used to be divided into 2. There's the small, tiny microbats and the big megabats. And the big megabats were once considered to be flying primates, basically.
Yeah. Wait, so is that not like are microbats not monophyletic anymore?
No, not anymore. No, like the megabats, the megabats nest within the microbats now.
That's interesting. That's new to me.
Back to the brain size and jaws. I heard that some part of the thing that our brain got bigger is because we've got the ability to chew our food more easily. We had more room for our brain to grow.
Yeah, so some people think that the shrinking of the dental arcade had to do with allowing for that brain case growth, rather. So, shrink the jaw and make room for this big globular skull on the back. A recent paper, though, found that to be the case when we're looking at the paleontology, that we don't actually see the shrinking of the dental arcade correspond so strongly with this growth of the brain case size. Which begs the question, okay, well then why did the dental arcade shrink? Like, why did we get a smaller parabolic palate smaller teeth, the shrinking of the canine
Mm-hmm.
tooth row? And that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
There's an interesting pattern in our overall morphology. Like if you look at the juvenile chimpanzees, they are really, really human-like. When you look at the profile, right? Like you have like a very big head and a small jaw. But when they grow up and become adults, then you have really, really these the jaw like really. How do you call it? They prognate forward.
Yeah,
right?
they get they get more prognathous. The supraorbital ridge gets more intense.
Really? We stay younger in some sense. We like the technical term is I think neoteny, right?
It's retained neoteny. Humans absolutely. Our adult skull, our adult face is much more similar to our infant face than an infant chimp is to an adult chimp.
Yeah.
And this is even more extreme in the likes of the Cercopithecus. I mean, like a baby baboon has much more orthognathic face, and then you look at adult males, and they've got a full muzzle. I mean, their muzzle is enormous, and a huge supraorbital ridge.
Have you seen like these realistic depictions of anime characters, like with the really big eyes and such? These are really.
No, but that's gross.
It's really creepy. But that's basically how we look from the chimpanzee's perspective. We are like really like baby apes or baby like
big
adult babies.
Yeah. I was gonna say off topic. I got a spammer on the Twitch stream of this broadcast.
Oh no!
Oh my!
Yeah,
Twitch.
We can become famous by buying views.
Nice.
Oh no!
But anyway.
But might the smaller jaw be just a consequence of neoteny, or is it maybe a more deeper reason for why we have smaller jaws? Or
it could be. I mean, it might be too just a metabolic consequence of eventually growing to cook our food. I mean, we do experience that reduction in canine tooth size, but our teeth stay pretty megadont until you start getting into Homo. I mean, megadonty is like one of the defining characteristics of Australopithecines. You lose the canines, but you keep the big teeth, or you don't lose them. You reduce the canines, but you got these big old honking teeth, big incisors, big molars. Big honking molars, yeah. And so it could be that it's
big chonkers.
Big. It could just be that it's a result of eventually getting into kind of genus Homo, right? And just being able to cook our food and being able to consume meat that doesn't actually involve biting organisms with our teeth,
right?
Or pulling them apart.
It's also interesting to see like. I've seen like the evolution of herbivorous mammals. They often divide their mouth into two parts. A crop, have like a space between with no teeth, like a toothless space, and then you have the molars behind it. And the reason why the division is that like herbivores first grab the food with the crop front teeth part, and then they chew with the back teeth part. But the primates, they basically manipulate their food with their hands. And that's why they have the same division in their mouth, basically.
Well, and the thing is, too, is primates are almost universally opportunistic omnivores. So even when we're like, herbivorous primates, it's like, yes, until it sees a bird egg or a lizard or an insect that it can come in and consume.
Protein.
Or in the case of chimpanzees, hunt down a monkey.
Or duiker too. Bonobos they love duiker. They'll go after little antelopes all day long.
I thought you said a biker, and I was like, dang.
Yeah, bikers. Yeah, they love the bikers.
I remember when I first saw a video of like a chimpanzee chasing down I don't know which species of monkey it was, but it was a monkey with a tail, and probably, and they just snapped the limbs of the monkey. Like I was like, oh no.
Well, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
They don't even the primates that are go into carnivory intentionally, like your panins, so bonobos and chimps. When they capture prey, they don't use their teeth. they physically rip it apart.
Yeah.
So the canines, that's partially why, like Panins, so chimps and bonobos, while they've got these really big, and you can see in the back here, they've got these really big, impressive canines compared to us, but they've actually already had a reduction compared to some of the other hominoids. So chimps have smaller canines than some of our Miocene apes, for example, which is very interesting. They don't need them. They use them mostly for intimidation, but even then, male canines aren't that much bigger than female canines in chimpanzees. They mostly fight with their arms and their strength, and that's how
don't go in a fist fight with a chimpanzee. You will always lose.
Yeah,
unless it's a baby, but then of course that's not a fair fight if you fight a baby.
I mean, I honestly might even lose to a baby chimp. Like those things are pretty lanky. They're pretty strong.
Unless you're a gorilla.
You really don't want to go. A silverback would just rip you to pieces. Those guys are big boys. There's a reason they don't have any natural predators.
Yeah.
Not really. Anyway.
It's also an interesting question. Like, why are we so weak compared to the other apes?
Because we don't need to be strong.
Yeah.
Big muscles are very, like, they have a very high energy cost, right? Why grow big muscles when we can just throw an atlatl or something?
Yeah.
And 20% of what we eat goes to our brains. Like our caloric intake is the brain is an energy like suck. It requires so much to be going. And the other big part that we can't forget here is that we're a cooperative species. Males and females, and males and males, and females and females, all of us get together in these big groups, and we use these big groups to beat other or kill them or hunt them or protect ourselves. So it's kind of an interesting deal.
It's a scene from like the remake of the Reboot of the Planet of the Apes, where Caesar was like, "Oh, one twig, we are weak, but a bundle of twigs together, we are strong."
Was that the 60s version, the last version, or the new version?
No, it's the James Franco Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Yeah, well, it's cooperation and big brains. If you have those two things, strength is an absolute waste of time. Yeah. You don't need it.
It's also
imagine if we branched off from the robust hominids instead of the gracile hominids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we'd probably actually have flatter faces than we do now. They've got these really orthognathic faces. Some of those paranthropines. It's really weird to see some of the depictions of them. They've almost got flanges, like a orangutan would.
Right.
But yeah, you want the perfect recipe for losing muscle mass. And in fact, you can add a third one to it because, again, we're persistence hunters. We're runners. We can run better than almost every animal on the planet. So you've got
the difference between fast twitch muscles and slow twitch muscles, right? Like the
slow twitch. You've got a persistence. You've got a persistence hunter that lives in groups, that uses tools, and it is a recipe for a weak upper body, short of coordinated ability to throw.
I think we have also like more fine muscle control. Like when a chimp manipulates things, they are really they use a lot of more strength to handle things, but we use more fine manipulative movements with our hands, right? Maybe.
Well, and that's why we can, like, even though we're 3 times weaker than a chimpanzee, we can deadly throw a spear or even a baseball with more power than a chimp can. A chimp can only lob. They can't coordinate all that strength into an actual precision throw. We can. And so you put a sharp rock or a pointy stick into the hands of an ancient hominin, and it may not be able to beat a chimp in arm wrestling, but as far as killing, we're deadly with that. I mean, that's our specialty.
Yes.
So,
Go
ahead.
So speaking of running, do we get that way running towards our prey or running away from our predators?
As far as persistence hunting, it's definitely chasing something down. Any predator that's coming after a human or an ancient hominin is going to be fast in the short run. And if we're not near a tree or near our friends, dead. You cannot outpace any of the predators on the savannah. They will kill.
We are among the even though we can run for a very far distance for a very long time without stopping, we are very slow too. Like we are one of the slowest animals on the planet. At least the ones that can walk, of course. I'm a bit generalizing, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Walker. Sorry, you were going to say something.
You're good. Well, I was just going to say it's kind of funny. Humans actually consistently beat horses in marathons.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we
I don't know.
lose the only animal that consistently outpaces humans, or there's a handful, so we'll only talk about the natural ones, is like ostriches, pretty much. Ostriches and camels. They're really, really good. And, they're, of course, interestingly enough, also evolved in these arid climates, where it's very important to be able to manage your water intake and continue for long periods of time.
And I also think dogs come close too, right?
Some dogs.
Yeah.
Things like gray
Siberian
wolves.
Huskies.
Yeah, things like gray wolves, as well as African painted dogs, are also persistent hunters. Sorry.
Yeah.
So they have a very similar adaptive strategy.
Like
and
maybe the
Right,
reason
for a long
why
time.
we really liked the dogs and the horses is because they could keep up with us, or perhaps like
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our lifestyle demands being able to go kind of slowly forever. I mean, we're a Terminator species. Like we pick something
It
that we
just
want to kill.
keeps coming.
Well,
I
yeah,
also,
we pick something we want to kill and we chase it for 3 days. That's how we roll.
and I also heard
Or we destroy its
I
forest.
forget where it was at, but I heard that we had the hardest time domesticating or taming African animals because we grew up with them. Literally, they're used to us.
I mean, that I don't know. That could be the case. It's certainly interesting that we didn't domesticate anything until dogs, and that was what 50,000 years ago, depending on who you talk to. It's recent, not just in like the grand scheme of things, but even in our evolution as a 300,000.
Did we domesticate dogs before we went to agriculture? I think we did, right? Before, like, dogs were older.
Yeah, we domesticated dogs before, and that was like the first thing, pretty much, and it wasn't even intentional.
And of course, I heard they didn't. I heard they domesticated themselves first a little bit before we went and did the rest of the way.
We accidentally selected each other, is how that went. I mean, it's really nice when you're living in the on the steppes, and there are all of these critters that are bigger than you that can kill you, in an instant. To have a built-in alarm system, and they gained our refuse piles, and we gained early warning system for meaner predators.
Yeah.
Also,
go
ahead.
I have seen like a video. I think it's the YouTuber called CCP Gray, who has like a video explaining why we domesticated horses and not the zebras, because zebras in the
I see that one.
While they are in Africa, their social group, they aren't really nice to each other. Not even to you, of course, not even to humans. But with horses, they have like a specific social group, like with one leader, and the rest are followers. So if a human domesticates the leader, then all the other ones just follow along with the leader. So you can more easily domesticate the horse compared to the zebra.
It's also no coincidence that we domesticated another omnivore. The domestication of the wolf, which are omnivores, people tend to think of them just as carnivorous, but they actually require the plant matter and the guts of the creatures that they eat in order to be healthy. A pure carnivorous diet for a dog, for instance, is horrible.
Yeah.
Cats, on the other hand,
when you see your dog eating grass, take a hint. Give them more veggies.
But interestingly enough, the next animal to domesticate was cats. It was dogs first, and then it was cats, and they were both incidental. Humans didn't intentionally domesticate either of our companion animals. We domesticated one another. It was a mutual decision where we tolerated their presence and they tolerated ours, and we found this nice symbiosis with one another. It pests away, and dogs, it was helping each other hunt and feed and warn each other.
And this also has been initially we are planning, like Jackson Newton and I, and also a few others are planning to do another video on the farmer's tale, where we go into the origins of agriculture, and the same thing might be true.
He uploaded that video last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet, but I can explain. There was also a the same thing might be true with us and our the crop that we cultivate, because the initial pressure of humans and the plants we cultivate might have been also accidental, not deliberate domestication, like the plants in the absence of the big megafauna that basically dispersed their seeds. The plants now are in an environment dominated by humans, and then it's more beneficial for the plants to attract the humans for seed dispersal.
Is it true? I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard before we knew that Neanderthals and them were a sister group, that we thought they were our ancestors.
We went through. There was a lot of controversy about where Neanderthals fit, because the first Neanderthals were discovered in the early 1700s, right? And this was in a time before we even knew about like extinction. And so they just thought that these were like arthritic humans, essentially. So the very first two Neanderthals that we found were just misidentified as, modern Homo sapiens. It wasn't until the the mid 1800s. It was in 1840 something. I don't know. I just did a video about this, but it doesn't really matter.
Been there.
Yeah.
The video comes out and it's out the other ear for me.
Yeah, but it was in the early, or not the early, I keep saying early. It was in the mid 1800s. It was discovered by this dude who worked at a quarry site, they were an industrial mining site, and they found these bones. They handed them off to a school teacher, and the school teacher was like, "Oh, that's weird." And so the school teacher presented them, and then 2 years later, Darwin's On the Origin of Species came out. And, there had already been evolutionary ideas like Lamarckianism and all that kind of stuff going around. So they were already sort of considered a species of human in some respect. But for the first 50 years of their existence, they were either characterized as a direct ancestor of humans, or they were not humans at all, and they were just some weird ape, right? And unsurprisingly, it was mostly creationists saying that, no, they're just an ape. They're too stupid to be humans. Whereas a lot of early evolutionists were the ones that were saying, "Oh, this is actually a direct ancestor of humans." Obviously, both are wrong. One's more wrong.
We be special. We be special.
Yeah.
I heard that actually Neanderthals might have a bigger brain than we had.
They did.
On average, they did. Yeah.
They did.
Yeah. But it's more like they were bigger in the back end of the brain, right? Like they didn't have really.
It's an occipital lobe pressure, and they paid the price dearly for having those large brains. They required a lot more calorically to maintain these large brains, metabolically speaking, than we did, and it forced them to be specialists on the organs of the animals that they killed.
Oh, really?
They actually, we find butchering sites and they leave a lot of the meat behind. The muscle attachments are still intact from, it doesn't look like they are actually carving the meat off of the bones. The hash marks are all around organ hotspots, and that's because the organs are really, really high calorically, especially the brain. They did a lot of crushing.
But why didn't they also eat the muscle? Why did they just left the muscle?
Because they butchered on site, and they butchered often. It wasn't worth it, calorically speaking, to kill an animal, a single animal, and take everything from it, than it was to kill multiple animals and steal the organs that are calorically beneficial to them.
I didn't know that, and maybe that's also why humans, or at least Homo sapiens, because we take the whole animal with us, I think, right?
Well, not only that, but we're generalists, so we were able to eat. We had a lower caloric content. Humans can survive on a lot lower calories than we thrive on, right?
And we're like,
so we could eat a lot more stuff. We're garbage cans as far as what we can eat. We can eat almost anything. The definition of a generalist. It's just humans. We're great at it.
And we
can eat more things than our dogs, even, and especially cats. So the cats are really hyper carnivores. That they don't.
Well, and we're great at eating plants that are supposed to be poisonous. I mean,
right.
we eat a lot of plants that are deadly to a lot of other animals, and we do it for fun. Like we eat caffeine, for instance.
That's also maybe it's also maybe the leftover of our primate ancestors, where we eat a lot of leaves, and we developed a high tolerance to natural pesticides that plants produce to chase away.
Even compared to them, our stomachs, even compared to other primates, our stomachs are just incredibly robust.
Oh, really?
It's actually quite hard to poison a human compared to other organisms. We are highly tolerant. And it's because we're generalists. We mix with each other. So we spread out to all these different locations and acquired, decent resistances to certain things, certain foods and gaining certain things like a lactose tolerance, etc. And then we come back and we interbreed with each other and everyone wins. So we're just...
it's actually funny. I was just thinking about that the other day, because I was like, man, I feed my pets purified water and all of these, things that I wouldn't even feed them like my food. Like I eat junk food all the time that would probably kill 99% of animals.
Yeah, well, it's that, and we eat like random rare stuff. Like if you drop a human in the middle of nowhere, right? We're probably going to be able to survive on whatever we find. Like what's the edible range of things for humans is huge compared to other animals. Now our big flaw is that we can't just eat any grass or plant that we find and have that actually be nutritious for us. Being an obligate omnivore means that we've got a really nice range of things, but we do have to combine it all. We can't specialize in one or we lose out on the nutrients. So, eggs and bugs and plants and fruits and all sorts of different things. Meat, we scavenge, we actively hunt, we do all sorts of different stuff. We fish. That's another big one, is that we'll just go to the coastline and comb along the beach and eat what we find. It's incredible.
Yeah, I also heard that, like, it was our fishing skills, the Homo sapiens, that gave us some of our brain advances too.
Well, potentially. I mean, I think it's less that, and it's more our ability to eat whatever. I mean, ancient Neanderthals, for instance, too, they were capable of combing along the beach and eating crustaceans and different tidal pool animals when they felt the need to. But the advantage of humans is that we just didn't need as much calorically, and we could run for long periods of time.
There's also a possibility that our fire, like cooking with fire, is also give us even more bigger range of.
We unlock the extra calories by cooking things. That's another. Yeah, that is another one.
Yeah, something are inedible without cooking even. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, that's true too. It breaks down certain dangerous chemical elements of the food.
What was the tuber that is toxic without cooking? Like I think it's cassava, right? Without cooking, or was another tuber? I don't know.
There's a lot of tubers that are like that. There are a lot of tubers and root systems that are like that. But yeah, we eat any and everything, and it makes us great at withstanding climatic change. Yeah. With Neanderthals, they have to follow the food. They can't just sit around and not incorporate meat into their diet. They have to incorporate these large animals, and particularly a lot of these calorie-rich organs. And so, when the climate changes and their prey animals move, they have to follow it. Humans can stick around wherever we please, and we'll probably find something to eat there. It's a reason why we were so good at colonizing basically the entire planet. And similarly, one of the most adaptive cercopithecoid monkeys is the rhesus macaque, which has a gut that's very similar to ours. They're the raccoons of the East. They eat whatever they want.
And they get whatever they want. If they ask us, where they are revered as holy, or I don't know. They get they are associated with a monkey god, right? In some areas of
Hanuman is one of them. But they get worshipped a lot. And coincidentally, as a side note, pretty much every culture that has monkeys living around it has some kind of mythology that relates to that monkey that has. Oh, the monkey comes from humans, or the humans come from the monkey. It's
oh, really?
Kind of, it usually spiritual elements to it, but they notice the similarities.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe the reason why like hardcore creationism originated in the Europe, where there are no primates.
Probably.
I wonder like there are also no stories about like that in the Americas, because or maybe in South America, maybe where there are like the New World monkeys. Maybe there are some legends there, but I don't know. Are there surviving legends from like the South American, like the ancient civilization?
They've got monkeys incorporated all into their mythology. Howlers and spider monkeys and tamarins and all sorts of stuff. They love monkeys down there, but they also eat them sometimes. So there's that.
On most trees that I see online, there's no real connection between the Australopithecines and the Homos. Do we know where that connection might be? Which branch?
Like who begets who? I mean, Australopithecus afarensis and Australopithecus africanus have a lot of similarities with Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis. Those guys, that's a very fine line between those guys. Also, more particularly, Australopithecus sediba and Homo habilis, rudolfensis, and gauchingensis. That line is very thin. And there's a reason people are like, oh, some Australopithecines should be in genus Homo. And then some people are like, well, some members of genus Homo should actually be Australopithecines.
That to me, that doesn't really matter. Like it's an arbitrary distinction at this point.
Always has been, always will be.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the anthropologists to just say, all right, we give up on taxonomy. Let's go with the phylogenetic code system. Right.
Yeah, the biological species concept. It's time to stop.
It's time to stop.
She's like, since we're always where our ancestors were, like, are we still technically I still can't say that. I still can't say that word.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it's more for convenience than anything else. Like, people name the Australopithecines, but you're right. I mean, that's why the Hominini is like a whole thing, right? It's kind of like a way to umbrella us in, but we'll never know. I don't think who we. Well, maybe we will. I don't know if our DNA retrieving tech gets even better. Like, maybe we will, or we find some really well preserved Australopithecines. But I very much doubt that we'll be able to actually draw a direct lineage back through the Australopithecines to say we directly came from this one.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, pretty much any phylogenetic comparison that you do with Australopithecines and genus Homo will show that, like, Australopithecus is paraphyletic, right? Almost every study you do will show that, like, Australopithecus africanus is more closely related to us than Afarensis, than it even is that Australopithecus africanus is to Afarensis, just because Afarensis is more basal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess that's also why most family tree phylogenetic tree species, most things are cousin species instead of direct ancestors. Like, oh, this is a cousin species.
Well, and that's why when someone's like, okay, humans probably came from an Australopithecus-like ancestor, something that probably was very similar to Australopithecus afarensis lurks in our family tree. Was it actually Australopithecus afarensis that then migrated south and begets Australopithecus africanus, and then we see genus Homo emerge? Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
The point of these transitional species is to show how this transition can occur, not how it did occur. It's very similar to in that way, it's very similar to the work on abiogenesis, where it's like we can show can come about, but we will likely never be able to show how it did come about.
Until we get that time machine, a conversation to go back and absorb it ourselves.
Fingers crossed.
It's really interesting. Like if you look up the concept of taxonomic boundary paradox, where can you screen share me for a moment from Dalia? Like it's like the concept where we've talked about it, like here with if you have the whole fossil record complete, then a taxonomic system of classification becomes impossible.
Yeah.
Because then you will have a situation where one mother is a different species, a different genus, even a different family than the daughter at some point.
Life does not care about the arbitrary boundaries that humans want to create, and it's always been a gradient, and it always will be. And that's I don't know. That's what makes it so fun.
Oh.
So yeah, it's like when you were talking about the difference between is this an Australopithecine, is this another Homo, or what is it? Then you are getting to the point where the fossil record becomes so complete, the boundaries become meaningless anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's how you have really need a really good fossil record there.
Yeah. That's the point. That's the problem, right? Is that the fossil record is getting too good. A good problem to have.
Yeah, they say we only have a few. They say we only have a few bones here and there, but we have like a lot more than that.
Yeah, they say. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, Walker, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one of their favorite things is like, we could fit all hominins into the back of a pickup truck or something.
Right.
It's like, dude, do you know how many bones you could fit into the back of a pickup truck? First of all, like.
And you can stack them pretty high too.
Yeah, if you're doing Tetris stacking, or even like if you crush them up or something, like you could put a lot of people into the back of a pickup truck.
Right.
Well, you could have like the complete paleontologic history of like all beetles, and you could probably fit them in the back of a pickup truck because they're so small. I mean, it's a totally meaningless. Or well, beetles. Yeah, there are a lot of beetles. I should have picked another. The brain puzzle to get it.
Yeah, but also arthropods don't fossilize very well, so I think
also shouldn't, like, if creationism is true, shouldn't there be none, like nothing at all?
Yeah.
Like it's like
true.
sure you have evidence, but no, look at how small it is. Like
the problem with creationists is they don't care. That's the problem. Like I've grown more jaded as the more time I spend talking to creationists, and a lot of a lot of them don't care.
I've seen the arguments going from there are no transitionals to we should expect millions of them to God just created transitional fossils.
They don't know what they think. They don't because they don't have a model. They don't have any way to cope with this, which is why Jensen. Oh God, I hate that we're talking about this on a science show. But that being said. It's important to note that like they've been dragged kicking and screaming into the concept of nested hierarchies, and now they're pretending they predicted it all along, as if none of us have been paying attention for the past 150 years when they've been saying there are no transitionals, there is no nested hierarchy. Cool. Show me a single source that was creationist in origin that was even okay with the idea, let alone one that predicted it prior to 2012. You won't find it.
Right.
Yeah, before we go back to our main topic, I was going to say I watched you on Dan's 1,000 subscriber marathon thing, and you back your Reddit post. You said the Reddit creationists were smarter than the YouTube creationists.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. They 100% are. The thing is that at least the ones on Reddit come up with original arguments. The ones on YouTube just regurgitate what they find elsewhere. The ones on Reddit, I mean, we had some regulars that would at least they were creative. I mean, although I will say we have had a couple of, and Walker knows this, as well. We've had a couple of online YouTube creationists that come up with original ideas. The problem is they're horrible. They're awful. Like they're not copacetic with anything else that same individual says. So, the fact, like the lesson learned of dealing with online creationists is that they really can and will just say anything. As long as they can stave off the immediate dunking that they're experiencing, they will contradict everything else they have said in the past.
Or when they are being dunked, then they will just remove the video.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's
I can speak of experience.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, there's very good reasons that if a professional creationist hasn't touched a topic, there's probably a good reason that they haven't touched the topic. They have at least somewhat of a reputation to, like they have to have at least some sort of pseudo credibility, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I have to clarify. They did not just remove the video because, of course, if you are being corrected, you can remove the video afterwards. But they said nothing about the correction. Like they just remove the video and pretend that nothing happens. That's the problem. Yeah.
I know just me. Some people like removing videos, not me. I like coming back at my old videos. I'm like, wow, that was terrible back then.
I think it's a learning experience. If you keep them up, you just post, "Hey, I was wrong about X, Y, Z." That's what you got to do. Yeah. And people are going to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes.
Sometimes I come across one of my older comments of somewhere, and I see like, oh, why was I so stupid back then? Just a few years ago, yeah.
Like I have a video like 6-7 years ago where I was saying that I'm an intelligent designer. Because at that time I thought intelligent design was the same as theistic evolution. So I'm like, oh, I'm an intelligent designer. So I made a big thing about it.
You help for that kind of stuff. Like everybody, you're always going to make mistakes, especially if you're on an online platform like this where every mistake you make is like immortalized. It's like you got to cut yourself a little bit of slack, just correct yourself and move on. And that's all you can do. But yeah, we don't see that a lot from our online friends, from some of our online pals here on YouTube, on www.youtube.com.
Yeah. So going back to the Lucy fossils,
Google University.
Where did we start? I know we have different diversity and stuff, but when did we get more from the Lucy side chimpanzee people to the more taller Homo sapiens Homos that we have now?
Oh, like body size wise?
Yeah.
Well, again, it depends on which Australopithecine you're talking about, because Katamudu man, an Australopithecus afarensis specimen, was 5'5" tall, which is quite big, even for like that rivals some of archaic Homo sapiens height. So, you got to consider regional variation and indeed temporal variation. Different species today come and go almost in a cyclic nature depending on their climate. Sometimes you have bigger species and then they grow smaller as the trajectory of the planet changes, and then they get bigger again and then when times are good. Populations, I should say.
I think they also became like more or better runners with Homo erectus, right? Like a better waistline, with so you have a more stable gait when you are running, right? Compared to the Australopithecines.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got some real basal looking Homo erectus in Dmanisi. These guys have these incredible brow ridges. I mean, their supraorbital ridge is just, it's Sahelanthropus-like almost. I mean, it's impressive. And so, these sometimes basal traits come back in style, I guess you would say. And again, that's the part where
they are really being retro hominins.
Yes, sexual selection throws a huge wrench into. You never know when something will pop up just because the females of the species were like, we're into that now. There it is. Okay.
Speaking of Homo erectus, were all those? They had a lot of diversity there. Were all of them subspecies or actually separate Homo erectus species?
Good question.
At this point, it doesn't really matter to me. Like it's like you can say like we for convention we just say that they are separate species based on a few distinct differences on the bones, but in real life I wouldn't be surprised that they were all like really interbreeding different populations. Like maybe you have a situation where with the brown bears and polar bears, like they are separate on separate continents or land masses basically. But when they are together, then they just interbreed with no problem.
Right. Yeah, when Homo naledi first came out, there was a bunch of debate as to whether or not Homo naledi was Homo erectus or its own species. And to me, it's just like it's kind of a moot point. Like I don't.
Right.
It's its own distinct population, right? It has its own lineage, right? And that's usually where I leave it.
Yeah,
and the species name is just for convention at this point.
Yeah. Well, the next generation of scientists I think there's going to be a big paradigm shift in how we address all this stuff. Because you're already ideally, I hope there's a big paradigm shift. I mean, they say what is the saying? Science changes as old people die, right? Like as tenure, rolls over into the next generation. But there's this whole idea too of like
species is a construct. Wake up.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole concept too of like what caused something to evolve, and they want to find one thing caused something to evolve, one singular pressure. That's asinine, in my opinion. It's never one thing. It's always a bunch of things. You can say, okay, well, maybe the primary pressure for, I don't know, large brains to evolve. Oh, I think the primary pressure was group size or sociality, or diet, or development, or whatever. It could be one of those things, but it's never going to be just one thing. And we'll never be able to, in my opinion, pin down, or rather, we will very rarely be able to pin down which of those pressures came into play first.
Yes, spoiler alert. That reminds me. Is it not confirmed yet? Next Saturday, give or take, me, Jackson, and RJ are going to talk about speciation.
Yeah, you're gonna have a great conversation with them. That are especially Jackson. Jackson is passionate about speciation.
I might also be able to attend. I don't know at what time it will be. Maybe it will be at midnight for me.
It depends on when RJ wakes up and when Jackson gets out of work.
Cool.
But speaking of speciation and subspecies, why it does confirm now they're separate? But why was it that we used to think that the Neanderthals and sapiens were the same subspecies of the Homo sapiens back like 10, 20 years ago?
Well, Humans and Neanderthals, right? Modern humans and Neanderthals definitely did interbreed, right? Like that's not really controversial. So it sort of brings into up the question, like, okay, well, how do you define a species? You know, what metric are you using? Because if you want to use the idea that, like, okay, if two organisms can interbreed and have viable offspring that can themselves go reproduce, right? Then humans and Neanderthals should be the same species. But there's a lot of different species concepts, right? So you have people like George Gaylord Simpson who would be like, no, that's dumb. We should.
Yeah. By that definition, the polar bear and the grizzly bear are same species.
Yeah, and same with like the lion and the tiger, right?
Yeah, right.
Hybridization will never. Yeah, you can't. I hate that as like the hard line for speciation.
It's not a hard line either, right? Because you also have things that are like, you have ring species, and you also have things that can sometimes hybridize and sometimes produce viable offspring. And you have some where, like, I guess this is a ring species, but A can hybridize with B, B can hybridize with C, but A and C can't hybridize.
Right.
So using that as a cutoff is
same species. Wait a minute.
Yeah. So using hybrid, obviously it's arbitrary to decide that's what the cutoff is in the first place, but then even then it has problems. It's a very problematic definition. Really there is no good definition of species.
The best that I've heard is it's species is organisms that tend to be reproductively isolated, but may be geographically isolated and may have some novel morphologic or genetic characteristic that separates them. It's like it could be a bunch of different things. In the end, the definition is it's entirely arbitrary.
If we're going with a specific definition, right? My favorite one is probably the evolutionary species concept by George Gaylord Simpson, which is just the idea that, like, a species is a lineage with its own evolutionary history.
Right.
It's just
I would also like, if you look at the different species with the phylogenetic history based on not just the ancestry, but also the genome within species, you see like a very bushy network, perhaps. But between species, you can see a more or less a neat bifurcating tree. And if you have that, then you can say, oh, these are different species. But of course, there can be exceptions where you have like interbreeding events that makes
also like incomplete lineage sorting.
Yeah,
right?
also true. Yeah, it's a really
huge
mess. It's a really mess. Yeah, you never have unless you're talking about really anciently diverging lineages like arthropods and vertebrates. Then you don't. Unless you have that, you don't have a problem. But then you do not talk about species anymore. Then you're talking
It's one of those things. Like, everyone agrees that they're different, but how we define these differences and how we weight these differences is all extremely relative.
Yeah, I think maybe we should have like a
different
an arbitrary cutoff point. Like, unless you have this much admixture with another population, then we will treat you separately, perhaps. Like, I don't know.
That's sort of how they do it with viruses, but we've gone way off topic from human evolution by talking about viruses.
Yeah. Those are doing ERVs for humans, but I think the most recent speciation event we know about is the Neanderthal splitting off from the
Denisovans,
Even that speciation event's kind of murky, just because Neanderthals had modern human, well, not actually our exact DNA, but because of these hybridization events, Neanderthals' mitochondrial DNA and their Y chromosomes was more closely related to ours.
Didn't you talk about like one individual whose one parent was a Denisovan and the other parent was a Neanderthal?
Yeah, that's there was a find from 2019 that's been colloquially called Denny.
Yeah,
that's what they named her. But it was it was a 10 or 11-year-old girl that was literally half Denisovan, half Neanderthal, like first generation hybrid. One parent was Denisovan, one parent was Neanderthal, which is honestly crazy that we even found that. That's extremely
Very
lucky,
lucky.
in my opinion.
Very lucky.
But
Yeah,
you know,
and you've got Homo heidelbergensis too that throws a monkey wrench further, because heidelbergensis likely left Africa in small portions as well, and probably did hybridize with Neanderthals and Denisovans when they interacted with one another. So you've got sapiens, you've got Denisovans, you've got Neanderthalensis, and if memory serves, Walker, there's some ghost lineage walking around who we've got no support for either.
probably multiple ghost lineages.
Yeah, and there,
Probably, yeah.
and there
Yeah,
was
all we know is that we have archaic admixture. We don't know specifically what that came from. And if we get, you know, there's a very, very good chance if we find, you know, a tooth from this archaic lineage and we're like, yes, this is what most of the archaic admixture comes from, there's still going to be like probably another small percentage that comes from something else, you know? So it's such a squishy topic, which is why I think it's cool. That's why I want to research it, but that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still true or not, but I remember a long time ago they thought that the heidelbergensis was the ancestor of both sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovians.
That's sort of the view I take, because I've sort of already given up on species concepts. So I think, you know, if the ancestor of, if we could have a picture of the direct ancestor of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans, that thing would look and act and, you know, be exactly like Homo heidelbergensis, right? So why not just call it Homo heidelbergensis?
I think I would say I suspect if we could somehow obtain the DNA from all these fossils that we already have, even the Australopithecines, I think it would just be one big web, not a bifurcating tree, but also like many different vines growing between the branches too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's
all over. Yeah.
Kind of like the old banyan tree thing back in the early life.
Yeah.
That's why Gould, he sort of called it like the great bush of life instead of the great tree of life.
Of course, creationists misunderstand that as in saying, "Oh, common ancestry is all wrong." Like, no.
Common ancestry, in my opinion, is more support for common ancestry. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say I saw
more common ancestry means less common ancestry to the creationist.
I saw a post the other day by our pal Gunter Beckley where he was like, scientists are saying that human evolution is the origin of human evolution is a bushy mess, and then you go and you read the paper and it's like, no, first true hominin was, because there's so many apes in the Miocene. It's like, yes. That's a good problem to have. That means we have too many specimens, right? It's just, I can't wrap my brain around how, you know, I think for the most, and I like Gunter Beckley, but I think for the most part, a lot of these people like eyeball the paper, and then they're like, I see these adjectives that promote confusion. It's a blog post, great, awesome.
Speaking of the bushy tree, I think we all would, like, from the DNA that we already have, I think we all already see a bushy tree with the Denisovans, Neanderthals, and humans. And again, also in your video, Walker, you also mentioned like there's a ghost lineage of an even more ancient human where we got DNA from, too, right? Which may have been Homo erectus for all we know.
So actually, we don't have DNA from this archaic lineage.
Yeah.
What we do is we have DNA from modern humans, and we can compare the coalescence of that DNA to other populations of modern humans, right? And we can find that, like, okay, you know, all of these, you know, disparate populations have a coalescence time of just say like 300,000 years, right? And this could be from the Khoisan people, who are usually considered like the most basal modern human, you know, however you want to define that, right? They usually have they're the oldest
mitochondrial DNA, right?
Yeah, well, and also Y chromosome, I believe.
Also Y chromosome.
But yeah, usually they're considered like the oldest population of modern humans, right? So we could compare, I guess, any other non-Khoisan population, right? So let's just say East Asian. We can compare that to a Khoisan individual, and we can say, okay, this gene has a coalescence time of, on average, about 300,000 years. And then we look at this West African population from like Cameroon or something, and we see that it has a section of DNA that coalesces back to like 1.5 million years ago, or like 2 million years ago. And so you think like, something's a little weird here, right? And so that's generally how we're detecting the super archaic admixture from, you know, usually software, things like Argweaver and stuff like that. So we can sort of detect that these admixture events were occurring, very likely, but it is also possible that something like incomplete lineage sorting. But the fact that it's happening consistently, right? It's not just one region like this; it's like 20 regions like this, and they also form like linkage disequilibria and stuff like that. It very strongly points to some sort of archaic admixture.
Mm-hmm.
Two things real fast. Two questions real fast. One, going back to there's no really line between species. That blur is there. I've heard some people argue that the Homo gaster is his own species, but some thought it was another branch of Homo erectus.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a classic. That's a classic. Generally, I think Ergaster is usually relegated to really, really archaic-looking Homo erectus. So, like Demonisi, they're like, "Oh, it's Homo ergaster." It's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's either a highly variable Homo erectus, or we can draw arbitrary lines at certain levels of variability and give them different names.
Yeah.
The naming is useful. It can be useful because it can help you kind of differentiate, what you're talking about. But you could also just use specimens for that, and effectively get the same effect.
That is something that the creationists also get a bit iffy about. Like the Neanderthals, are they Homo sapiens or are they a different species? Like
I could throw myself into oncoming traffic about how they deal with Neanderthals. The answer is broadly the same.
Neanderthals. Back when I was still going to church, some people were thinking about that Neanderthals were descendants of were Cain's cursed descendants.
Oh my god!
Yeah, that was a pretty popular view in the early 1940s until 1970s or 80s. That sort of fell out of favor.
Yeah.
Kent Hovind's view that Neanderthals are some sort of like degenerated man, right? That they're just really old people. That was the consensus, quote unquote, from 1980 to 1990, and now it's sort of turning into they don't want to touch it at all because we have their DNA. Basically, that's what it's turned into.
Yeah, they can't.
Whether they can be considered a separate species or not is not really the point. We know that they are a separate population. Like humans today, everyone alive today is more closely related to each other than they are to Neanderthals.
Speaking of wanting to throw ourselves into oncoming traffic, there's this one creationist YouTuber. I'm pretty sure Erica calls him Monkey for Banana or something like that.
Yes,
you may have heard about him.
Yeah, you might have heard.
One of his favorite talking points is just they're fully human. They're fully human. They're fully human. Without ever defining what fully human means.
They would never do that. They can never do that. To define literally anything with regard to human evolution is to set themselves up for annihilation.
Yeah.
They can't do it. Of course he doesn't touch it. Of course Monkey doesn't touch it.
If I define human, then there can be a transitional fossil. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This individual is the definition of doubling down. I've never seen anything like it. And Monkey for Banana's Neanderthal position is a perfect, exemplary example of how doubling down works with creationists. Addresses nothing, reasserts point A.
I think
that's how that works.
I think what's the fallacy called when you make a statement that is so vague it has no meaning, but it conveys or it tries to convey a significant meaning even though there is none. Yeah.
I don't know, but whatever it is, it's certainly
argument from ambiguity, perhaps.
Okay. That sounds right.
Yeah.
And speaking of interbreeding, I also heard that it was their interbreeding with the Novicens that let the Tibetans survive in higher altitudes.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a gene called the EPA something. I think it's EPAS1 or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, so that gene was actually found in Denisovan genomes, and then we looked and sequenced more human populations, and we're like, oh hey, Tibetans have. I could actually pull up a really cool figure on this.
Is that a hemoglobin gene or something else?
It's related to hemoglobin. Well, so it's a transcription factor, right?
All right.
It's a transcription factor that activates in hypoxic environments, and it basically turns on a bunch of hemoglobin proteins and stuff like that. Things that'll just recruit more oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So let me pull
it doesn't change the hemoglobin protein itself, no.
No. Yeah, it's just it's a regulatory element.
Right.
Okay.
I'm gonna get some more coffee. I'll be right back.
Yep.
Just knock that.
Yeah, keep those calls in frame.
Yeah. Oh, I
like those calls. Yeah.
I think I have like 30 minutes left before I start needing to wrap this up because I got to work at 5 and it's almost 4 o'clock now. So we can talk for like 30 minutes, give or take. But then even though I love to stay longer, I gotta pay those bills.
Okay. I found the figure. All right.
So somebody else in the chat mentions there are 2 different independent ways of adapting to high altitude.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It's definitely possible.
I think maybe talking about.
Oh yes, actually,
maybe the one the Andes people from the Andes Mountains did that too.
Yep, you're exactly correct. Yeah. So I remember hearing about this. This isn't something I'm super well informed on, but apparently mutations in the EPAS1 gene, that is what it's called, by the way. The mutations in the EPAS1 gene are highly correlated with all high altitude environments, including Andes populations. Although the people in the Andes probably didn't inherit it from Denisovans. Recent human evolution is also an extremely neat topic. Yeah. If you could share my screen super fast, right? I'll explain this figure. It's really neat, right? So this top bar, they basically just color coded all the different substitutions, right? This top bar, you see these 2 little green bars. Mm-hmm. This is the Denisovan haplotype, right? So they have all of these substitutions. This purple
what does the vertical lines, black lines mean? Each vertical
those are the substitutions, right?
Substitutions.
Yeah, so you could say like, okay, here's the ancestral sequence, and this is a TTCF, not enough, but you know what I mean.
If you look at basically from left to right, that's basically a sequence of the genome of one sequence.
Yeah. And like I said, the white space is ancestral genome.
Yeah. Right.
And the black space represents some sort of substitution. And actually, if you look at it, the Tibetans have the exact same substitutions that the Denisovans have, more or less, right? There's some differences and all this kind of stuff. So it's almost 100% confirmed that Denisovans inherited this.
I really like this diagram because it looks exactly like a barcode.
Yeah, it does. And then if you look at like Han Chinese populations, they probably did get some DNA from the Denisovans at this specific site, right? But it's present in a much lower frequency. And then you get down here and it's just basically noise. But yeah, it's very, very consistent. You have very solid linkage blocks that are shared between Tibetans and
how big is this space of the genome?
Let's see. I don't know. Well, this specific graph looks like it shows 95 specific sites. I don't know if that's the full size of the genome or just the variable sites. Basically,
across our sequence, they only look at specific sites that are interspersed within that region. Basically.
Yeah. So if let's just say the gene is like 400 base pairs, right? They only have the 95 base pairs that are variable, and then yeah.
So it's not like one line is the neighbor of the other.
Not necessarily. No, I mean it could be. I could just be misreading this, but I don't think so. No. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think that's a really cool graph.
Nice. Oh.
All right. It's another minute. I had a question from a few topics back about the. Like the human lice of the head lice and the pubic lice, our hair is basically divided into different regions, and I wonder why we retained our hair is or at least the very thick dark hair at certain places. Like of course our eyebrows give away our emotions. That's probably the reason why we have eyebrows still. But I wonder why we have hair on our armpits and also, of course, the genitalia area and such.
Yeah, there are different reasons for each of those, at least as far as I am aware. As gross as it is, the underarm hair actually helps facilitate more powerful body odor, which might have to do with the very little pheromonal and scent communication that hominoids do, which is to say not very much, but occasionally it actually might just be a male thing, and females just have it due to correlated response. But this blast of smells is something that sometimes males tend to exude when they're getting into big fights, and then they just happen to be stinky on all other occasions too.
So if your opponent runs away with his hand in front of his nose, then you win the fight. You stink so bad.
Yeah, you stank them out. You stank them out.
Yeah.
The eyebrows, it's great for communication. It's also good for keeping water and rain out of the eyes on downpours. Head hair is an interesting one.
I had more of that sometimes because when I'm sweating, if like I came over my eye, when I'm sweating outside, like my eyes are like sealed shut sometimes.
Yeah, the head hair is an interesting one. Some people have proposed that head hair, because there's actually no difference in the length to which males grow their head hair. So most of us, like, keeping close cropped hair is something of a new deal. But this long hair, like, I've got the perfect example of it. It covers my head and it covers my shoulders, the areas that are most exposed to the sun when you're bipedally moving around. So it actually might be a radiation protection or direct heat protection deal.
I don't know about it. Like there are some different hair types among humans. Like for example, in certain African populations, you have like really this really bushy type of hair, like that curls, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it changes the story around it. Maybe the curly type hair is new.
Personally, I kind of worry with questions like these of attributing these things, because obviously it could be that like longer hair covers our shoulders and stuff.
Yeah.
But it also could be complete, like maybe some sort of behavioral. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right. It could be sexual selection.
It could be some behavioral thing that we have no idea about and will never preserve. Right.
There's
a theoretically infinite number of pressures that could have caused it.
And that's why it's important to basically what I'm trying to do here. Maybe I haven't done it well enough, but it's essentially like you can offer explanations. That doesn't mean that they're the case, which is why it's been proposed. We can't prove it.
There's also a possibility of just genetic drift. Like there's a random mutation that causes our hair to grow long, and it just got fixed in the population for no specific selection reason, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I was used to wonder if it was more or less Neanderthal DNA. Maybe probably not, but that they had some guys' chest hairs really hairy, other ones like more smooth.
The dimorphism in hair is really interesting. My professor, or my advisor, Plotkin, he's proposed that it could just be an androgen consequence. So it's just like a consequence of the hormones that differ between males and females that happen to act on the hair that we have. And because we've changed from being covered, like the interesting thing is like those terminal hairs that males get on their chests, when women are exposed to higher levels of androgens, they get that too. So it's possibly just a difference in hormones.
Might be the hair loss a byproduct of neoteny. Like if you with neoteny, you often have different levels of hormones where you have like less pronounced adult features. Maybe that's also related to the hair loss.
It could be. Yeah, it could be. I mean, a lot of the whole concept of pubic hair, like that's been proposed by many people. Again, as Walker, astutely mentioned, you run into some dangerous territory when you're talking about what is effectively evolutionary psychology.
Right.
But it has been proposed that the reason why pubic hair is a thing is so that we can properly distinguish between those who are sexually mature and those who are not.
Yeah. Also, I think since I probably besides us, it seemed like maybe Homo erectus were the most diverse besides us.
I
have an insane range.
Diverse.
What maybe spread out more, maybe.
Okay. I thought you meant like morphologically. I was like, I don't know that we even approach this.
Did they have? I don't know if it was just us. Did they have different? Do we know if they had different melatones? Like we have like more. The higher up north we go,
I would suspect that it's the same pattern, unless they have a lot of hair. But I would suspect that the Homo erectus would have the same type of hair pattern that we have.
We don't have any yeah, guess where I'm about to go with this. We don't have any Homo erectus genomes, right? So we don't know what their melanin production looked like. But since we do have Neanderthal genomes, we can tell that Neanderthals also displayed a very wide array of skin color diversity, implying, at least to me, that that's a very human thing. So I would be honestly surprised if Homo erectus didn't have a large amount of skin color diversity.
Also, this is maybe interesting to come back with what Erica mentioned about Neanderthals focusing on the organs. Like when you eat organs, you also eat like a lot of vitamin D. And you don't need the lighter skin to get enough sunlight for vitamin D production. Like for example, I think when the Inuits, right? They eat a lot of vitamin D from their diet. And that's why they also have like a more darker skin tone, even though they are at a very high latitude too.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, the skin color is just it's a response to the environment. That's it.
Yeah,
it depends. Get you enough vitamin D from the sunlight, or do you need or do you already have vitamin D in your diet? Then you don't need to have a lighter skin tone.
Well, I wish I had some of that because I get sunburned so easily.
Dude, I was sitting outside for a lunch for like 2 hours, and I came back looking like a lobster.
Oh my god. Yeah, you got it. It doesn't take much. My dad's half Pakistani, and so I've got 1/4 Pakistani going on, and I've got that. It's very difficult for me to get sunburned. It's
Consider yourself lucky.
Is your ancestry Irish by coincidence, Walker?
No, mostly English.
Mostly English. But also close in the British Isles. Yeah,
I'm not going to say it's wrong.
Yeah, the British Isles. Yeah.
So if any of you took that ancestry DNA or other things?
I have not.
No. I'm really suspicious about the validity of the test, and also the reason why you should take a test. Like it might give you the wrong impression. Like it might even enforce the race realism idea, of course.
Oh God!
So yeah.
Oh my
God. I took one a
sus.
few years ago. I took it on camera. It was hard since I'm terrible. I'm a terrible spitter, so I can't drink anything for it. I spent the whole video trying to spin in a tube.
I've done haplotyping on myself before, but I've never done it at I've never sent it off to a different thing.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. I mean, obviously the technology is great and it works superbly, but like doing it on a mass level like that with the ancestral, I imagine there's probably quite a bit of guesstimation going on.
For sure.
It's really dependent on your data. Like if you have they want to correlate your markers with other markers that they found in other regions, but if they increase the sampling size, maybe the set of markers that are unique to one region changes if they update their system. Yeah, it's really dependent. Sure. Yeah.
Well, and also, I think your cultural heritage is very different from your genetic heritage, right? Like my girlfriend's family is Native American, and unsurprisingly, her ancestry test came back like 30% Native and like 70% European.
Yeah, I like
historical things.
Yeah, there is an anthropologist. I forget his name. There's an anthropologist who often does talks, and he says he gets a lot of questions about whether they are descendant from Vikings. Oh, am I descendant from Vikings? But he explains that if you're European, everyone in Europe is descendant from Vikings. And probably everyone, if you go back far enough, everyone is descendant from Vikings eventually.
Go back far enough, people say a lot of people are descended from Genghis Khan too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
right.
Yeah, that's the thing about off topic, kind of off topic. But think about racism. We all can still interbreed with each other. We can all get along with each other.
Racism is whack.
Yeah, it's also if you look just at the mitochondrial haplotypes and also the Y chromosome haplotypes, basically all non-Africans are just a subset of Africans. So you're an African, phylogenetically speaking. So it's not really to say that we are separate when we are just within the same group. Is really idiotic to me.
Also, like diversity and stuff, like same with languages. Like in America, we have like maybe 6 or 7 dialects in each of the country, but over in England, where it came from, there's like 50 million dialects.
Yeah, that's a great analogy for the founder effect. Actually, that's an excellent analogy.
Like we can go like America, we go like 20, to go like 30 miles, or give or take, you give a different dialect on the south. But I heard in England, you can go like maybe 10 miles that way, and you're different dialect.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. It's also the evolution of language is also, I think it pretty much maps the or I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken, but also correlates with the genealogy of humans, right?
So there's someone at my school who does work on that, and I think it's really interesting. Yeah. And yes, it does. It extremely strongly correlates.
Yeah. Of course, there are also of course French probably also have a lot of ancestry with Germans probably too. So it's not a one-to-one relationship.
Plus, it's like not just direct lines. Also, with proto, and we have horizontal gene transfer. Like England.
Oh yeah.
Originally, it might be Germanic at first, but then when the Normans invaded, we have some French in there too.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It depends on the on the specific contact between groups, and you can have a very unique languages appear from that interaction. But I also had a question about with the hair. Like, do non-human apes also have a similar hair pattern? Like they have like the hair on their eyebrows are thicker than the rest of the face, and do they also have like thicker hair on the scalp and also thicker hair on the armpits, like a similar pattern than we have, or not?
I don't know.
I don't think they do. The thing about a lot of apes is that they still have these superorbital ridges, right? They got these big old brows, and they can do lots of expression with those brows. So they don't really require the hair on the brows like we do, because we've lost these massive ridges that allow us to express to the same degree. As far as their armpits go and the tops of their heads, I don't think so. I don't think that they've got the same pattern as we do. Now, follicles, right? We have the same number, right, as the panids.
So there is no difference between the hair on their groin in amount and type compared to their chest hair, perhaps, or like.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think they have that differentiation the same that we do. I don't think so. But the kind, hair is one of the big differences between us and some of the other apes. But of course, they also differ from one another. I mean, you see the type of hair that male orangutans grow, these massive, long, draping hair on their arms that, is effectively all over their body. That kind of hair that terminates at that length isn't seen in other primates, except for us on the tops of our heads, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, at least for the guys, we lose our top hair more than we lose our other body hair first.
Is there a similar pattern of balding in chimpanzee or in all the apes?
Oh, really? That's kind of cool.
Yeah. I'm asking if there is there.
Okay. Pattern. I thought you said that.
I don't know. Is there like a pattern of balding maybe?
Their hair thins, but it doesn't, because they don't differentiate between the hairs on the tops of their heads as they do from the rest of their body. It mostly just thins out and grays all over.
Do also male chimps have like beards, perhaps? Like I don't know if that's also a thing. Like if memory serves, I think males and females are fairly identical. They actually grow hair on their face and on the rest of their bodies. Like you can look to Macaca fascicularis, the long-tailed macaques. They get these really beautiful mustaches and beards and things like that, but both sexes have them. So they don't differentiate in the same way we do. It's really interesting when you look at how males and females and humans differ in how we grow our hair, because that kind of makes us sexually dimorphic in a unique way. We're not really that dimorphic, males and females. In terms of like our skeleton, nothing. Yeah, I mean, there are distinct differences, like in pelvis size and such.
Pelvis size, and males tend to have denser bones. But stature tends to be pretty similar.
Wasn't that the thing of your paper you wrote?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I focused on dimorphism of the canine teeth, though, across extant primates. So I looked at not body size or anything like that. I was specifically concerned with the canines.
So we're gonna get a chance to read it. We're gonna get a chance to read your paper.
It's going to be a long time. You're going to have to wait a long time because I have to get it approved. It first has to be approved by my MRes, and then I have to actually submit it to a journal, and that's another 6 month to a year process of actually getting published to a journal. And you're not allowed to talk about it until it's published, really. So I can't even really legally. But if they find out, they can you're publishing. They can take that away. They can be like, oh, if you're talking where anybody can ask what you've done, then they can just say no, we're not publishing you anymore, which sucks.
Yeah,
so.
I was joking.
Might be the case. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I can't wait. When it's finally published, years later, people have you as a source in their future papers.
I mean, that'd be cool if they think my results are good enough. I mean, I think my results are great, but I also wrote the paper. So it's like, and it's, you're putting way too much excitement. It is not an exciting paper to read. I like it because I like the subject, but most people aren't that interested in teeth differences.
I guess excited because I know someone who's has a paper published now.
Well, don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. We'll see.
I mean, you already know people with published papers, right? You've talked to Dan before.
Oh, yeah.
So you know people.
Of course, he doesn't advertise it very much. So
no, because generally scientists don't. It's to me, it's sketchy whenever people are like, "Hey, remember he has a PhD from Harvard." Most scientists don't care.
PhD, yeah. My fiance, he loves King of the Hill. That one quote from King of the Hill where Hank's talking about Christian rock, and he's like, "You're not making Christianity better. You're just making rock and roll worse." Yeah, it's like that's how I feel about Nathaniel Jeanson's Harvard PhD. It's not making Nathaniel Jeanson more. It's making Harvard seem worse of a university.
Yeah. Like when they are mentioning the PhD and the institution without the special what topic it is, that should raise an eyebrow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Jeanson, he's developmental biology or something like that, like something developmental.
I think it's cellular.
Is it cell bio? Maybe it is.
I might be
maybe
wrong.
it is.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's not.
They never tell. They never tell. So how would we know?
It's from Harvard.
It's from
Harvard.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. What it is not is genetics, though. We know that much.
Yeah. But about my question about it seems that when it comes to the skeleton, we aren't that much sexually dimorphic. But when it comes to our facial features, more of the superficial aspects, we are more sexually dimorphic. So perhaps maybe that's also an interesting aspect of human evolution when our sexual dimorphism switched from being skeletal to more facial sexual dimorphism.
Yeah, and there's also it's proposed too that it might have to do a lot with the androgens for the facial hair and stuff like that, but also for upper body strength. So males are obviously males and females track pretty close as far as lower body. They're pretty similar. A lot of the persistence running and endurance stuff, those records tend to be really close. But upper body males tend to outpace females by I think it's 30%, something like that, which isn't insignificant. Not dimorphism wise. So that proposes, interestingly enough, since male chimpanzees are about 30% larger than females, that kind of is interesting. That almost suggests that the sexual dimorphism isn't skeletal, but it's muscular. And it's limited to the upper body, which is strange. It almost suggests that the competition, it matches with the competition type though, right? Males, they fight using their upper bodies. So it suggests maybe the fighting that they're doing over females. And that's on average, of course.
It might be also maybe I'm being sexist about this, but maybe it's also because females tend to carry around the babies and males carry around more of the spears or such. Maybe I'm being.
Are you talking about as an evolutionary pressure?
Yeah,
and not necessarily getting the workout in.
Right.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, the interesting thing is at least in archaic humans and in Neanderthalensis, it doesn't look like there's a huge division of labor until you start appreciating agriculture. There are a lot of females that are buried with hunting equipment and things like that, and have similar, especially Neanderthals, have similar physical abnormalities. So pathology, they're being harmed in the same way, which suggests that with Neanderthals, they weren't partitioning that labor very much. Females were getting hurt in a lot of the same ways as males were.
Yeah, I heard that too. That before the agriculture happened, before the Ice Age ended, that both males and females had to survive, help each other survive.
I've also seen a recent paper, like last year, there was a paper about how it showed that even females in our own species also hunted regularly. Even though males have more, on average, more upper body strength, with tools like the atlatl, I think it's called, it basically equalizes the strength difference between.
Yeah. I think it sort of asks which begets which, right? Like, of course, it does seem like there's a general trend in hunter-gatherer societies for men to do hunting and women to do gathering, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was an evolutionary pressure to be that way. It could have been the
cultural,
opposite,
maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, obviously it is definitionally cultural. Yeah. But it also could have been the opposite, right? Like it could have been, on average, men are slightly stronger, so it was, more favorable for them to be the hunters.
They could carry the big mastodon bones back.
When you're hunting with for example, the a spear or the atlatl, how do you call it again? The extension of the spear.
Atlatl? Yeah. It's probably, yeah, that's what I call it. That's probably a southern redneck version of saying it.
Right. But when you're hunting like that, then your upper body arm strength doesn't really become much of a factor. It's just
that's true.
It's just a matter of how precise you can.
But by the development of that, it could have also been fixes to the population already, like those cultural factors.
Yeah, the thinking too is that it's male-male competition that is what differentiates the strength difference from males and females. It is almost universally accepted that whatever the female body type is the ideal for the species. That's what's going to be most robust with regard to accepting climatic change and things of that nature, because they're the ones that actually have to raise the offspring. Males usually have the competition aspect that comes into play. So potentially males are competing stronger than females because they're competing with one another, and then they utilize that in hunting, and that difference isn't appreciated very much because, especially early on, it's not that noticeable, particularly because you have to think muscles versus just like visually looking at stature. Males and females are pretty similar. They tend to be about. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Although there was actually a video I've seen by Fox with a V and not an F. They did a video about marriage, like monogamy versus polygamy, and they mentioned a tribe where the males they don't compete for females. They basically treat every child as their own child, no matter whose father it is. They don't care. They don't care whose child it is. It's just everyone's child is my child, basically, in the tribe.
Village living. And paternal confusion. Like paternal. It's got this sexual arms race between males trying to inseminate as many females as possible and females trying to confuse paternity, defend against infanticide, and get as many resources from as many males as possible. And this sexual arms race kind of decreases as cognition comes into play, but it doesn't mean that it totally goes out the window. Early human ancestors, Australopithecines and the like, probably did engage in this kind of thing, worry about the infanticide and paternal confusion and such.
That'd be a thing if like I know some species they do that, and some like maybe insect species, other things that if females could hold different male sperm in them, and then like they had babies, they don't know who the father is because it takes lots of people.
Well, and that's how they do it. I mean, they confuse paternity in promiscuous species. That's the whole point. That's why females get promiscuous, is because they're trying to defend their offspring and secure resources. But going back to something we said earlier. I think that there's this really interesting cultural facet, I guess, where like hunting is the cool thing. Like you want to be hunters. Women should be hunters. Awesome. And while women did hunt, females did hunt. We know that. Gathering is the sleeper source of metabolic gain. Gathering, this was something that occurred every now and again. It's an everyday thing, and it's probably why many humans were matrilineal and formed these matrilines, because the females, similar to elephants, were the ones that knew where the gathering spots are. It's another aspect of the grandmother hypothesis that kind of to humans and how we do reproduction, why women do menopause, because old women, the ones who stay in their natal groups, the ones who help raise the offspring that aren't theirs anymore, also remember the old spots that are reliable for the tribe as they're moving around nomadically. And they've shown this in modern hunter-gatherer tribes. Old women at certain times of the year bring in the most calories any member of the society, which is really, really interesting. What that suggests is that there's a huge benefit to gathering, and gathering is cognitively going to have a huge payoff for these organisms as they can secure these.
I would suspect that the hunter-gatherer were, of course, they were hunting too, but I think most of their food comes from gathering, because you can not really rely all the time on like hunting big game all the time. Like it's not really a smart thing to do it every single day to try to hunt. Like you probably would only hunt in the season, in the right season, for example. That's
is that what you're going for in your game, a matriarchal society in your ancestor game?
No. I mean, the whole point of all this stuff is like, traditionally, historically, there's been this, man the hunter lens that's applied over human evolution. But the reality is that both sexes played very important roles in keeping the society moving, and they worked together, and the lines were not bimodal. It's not like females only did hunting and females gathering and males only did hunting. What we see from paleopathology is injuries cross that line a lot. And what we see from modern hunter-gatherers is that everyone does everything and pitches in on raising each other's kids and securing resources. It's just, it takes a village is kind of the moral of the story. And to put it under the girl power, girls did all the stuff, or men did all the stuff, that's silly. It's a waste of time. Everyone did everything in many situations.
Well, as much as I love to talk forever, people gotta get their Big Macs. Like, get right.
I have one last question in the chat. Like, if I remember correctly, chimps also have a menstrual cycle, right? So, is there a difference in terms of the length, like the timing of the menstrual cycle between us?
I don't know about menstruation. I know that the big difference between humans and chimps with regard to female reproduction is estrus. So female chimps, they go in that is just incredibly obvious. Their hind end swells to, it's like the size of a dinner plate. It's very obvious to everyone which females are in estrus. Humans have...
Thank God that doesn't happen to us anymore.
Humans what's called concealed ovulation. Of course, that implies that it's intentionally hidden. It could just be a consequence. But there is the fact of the matter that it does use paternity further, because a female, this is getting into the evolutionary psych stuff that's really dangerous and not great a lot of the time. But theoretically, if you're a female, females tend to know when they are ovulating, but males, it's not as obvious. So they use paternity and, maybe sneak off and mate with a very robust, powerful male that tends to get a lot of females, and then settle down pairwise with a male who is really good at raising offspring. That's like the red-pilled, horrific idea behind concealed ovulation. The reality of it is we have no idea why humans do concealed ovulation. There could be a million different reasons. So that's the big difference.
One of the typical just show stories that I have heard is like we have a concealed ovulation because it invites the man to be more caring for longer term, to be
he doesn't know. He has no idea. There are a number of different benefits for females with concealed ovulation, especially if the female is aware of when she's ovulating, which most women are. And so there's go ahead.
So we kind of hit a lot of stuff once we start wearing clothes, Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It's an interesting deal, but yeah, chimps and bonobos, they both menstruate. It's just not as, to my understanding, it's not as intense as human menstruation.
So a few shout outs real fast before we go. Ness here, he took a few months ago. He took a video that we made of nuclear energy and made it more condensed and full of pictures.
Cool.
Yes, it's more like a cut version of the Hangout. Yeah, and the original Hangout was like 3 hours, So I made a 1 hour version of it, with annotated visual aids for it.
Awesome.
Yeah, like an abridged version.
Of course, with Von Dahlia's permission, of course.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never hurts having an abridged version of, because most of my podcast, like today, most of my podcasts are rambling about everything I think under the sun.
Not a bad thing.
Yeah.
True.
Although I have to say, like when I was making this video, my entire laptop was full. Like there was no space left. Like it's not like can I even finish this video? Like, would you let me? Like I just made it barely.
I hate having to go back. Okay, do I need this file in my computer anymore? Like delete. Do I still need this?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, like Erica, I'd love to have you back again, talking about different things. We can talk about the pan branch, the gorilla branch.
There wouldn't be much. I mean, we can talk about the extants, but there's really not much to talk about as far as like the leading up to them. Our fossil record is incredibly poor for the canons and for gorillas alike. We have actually, I think we've got more from orangs than we do from either of them. But I can always talk about primates. I've always got something to say about primates.
Although this is probably a fringe view. I have seen one individual suggesting that some of the fossils, like the parental penis, for example, are the ancestors of gorillas, not related to you. Yeah, it's a fringe view. I know.
Yeah, they're wrong.
Yeah.
No.
So basically, they want to explain why don't we have fossils of chimpanzee or gorilla ancestors, and then they just say, because these are the ancestors. Yeah.
People don't like taxonomy. People don't like the luck aspect of it. Like, you know what? If you live in a rainforest, we don't know about you. I'm really sorry. You should have lived on the plains. Like,
yeah, and I also remember a while back you talking about how people might have ever thought about breeding humans and chimps. Has anyone ever thought about breeding chimps and gorillas?
Yeah, I'm sure they have. They would have a harder time though. There's a much larger gap to cross than with humans and pandas. I am of the opinion, and the literature, as far as I understand, is of the opinion that the biggest problem with human chimp hybridization is the zona pellucida around the egg of both species, which gate checks rather the sperm. So if you really wanted to try, the name of the game would be actually direct in vitro fertilization, which to my knowledge, and I hope that this remains true, no one has tried. So, but someone probably has.
It's really uncomfortable to think that it might be possible, but it shouldn't be tried.
It shouldn't be tried. I am actually of the opinion that it probably is possible. With the level of hybridization that we tend to see amongst other animals, I see no reason as to why if you could bypass that.
I actually hope it is not possible, because if it's not possible, then it would not be a problem. But if it is possible, then oh god.
Someone probably tried it somewhere, and how far they got, I don't know.
Also, the question would be if it is possible, will they be infertile hybrids or fertile hybrids?
We don't know.
Lions and tigers.
We have. I think we have made a hybrid between a camel and a llama, right? Like
I have no idea.
Like an artificial hybrid between the two.
I want to say yes.
Yeah, I think I shared that before.
They are more distantly related than we are to chimps. So it's
as is usually the case.
Yeah.
So besides possible reappearances on here, which hopefully is in 6 months, 6 months again, what's coming up on your channel?
Me? Oh man, I'm hoping to have a couple of videos come out next week. I'm hoping to get. I've got my videos scripted and recorded. KPG extinction, so I'm very excited about that. I'm hoping to get something out about the bite-sized bust for carbon-14 dating, specifically C14 in dinosaurs, coal, and diamonds. Because that's creation.
Are you doing a video on the KPG extinction and the survivors of the extinction event?
Yeah.
I have a series on Earth's mass extinction.
Yeah, that's the last thing you haven't done.
I have some suggestions of often we focus on the surviving mammals of the KPG extinction, but I know of some very interesting crocodile relatives that also survived the extinction event.
It's a weird deal. It's all burrowers.
I'm looking forward to that one most of all from you, the last one, because that's the birth the primates came from that extinction.
Yeah, that's the truth. And then I'm hoping to get a video on Gaia streaming services for ancient humans in Antarctica, which is just, it's absolutely a miscarriage of science. It's horrific. It's as bad, if not worse, than some of the stuff creationists have put out. It's absolutely incredible. No one pays attention to the woo. The ancient aliens people need a smackdown, that's for sure. Long term, I want to get intelligent design. I think that'd be a cool long video. History of intelligent design and why it's Garbo. But other than that,
yeah, I know I made a joke about it on your video, but your bite-sized 36-minute bite-sized bust.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. The elephant video was one of my favorite videos in the recent time.
Oh, nice.
Well, Walker wrote most of it, so credit to him on that.
Well, I mean, okay, so I wrote the parts about elephant phylogeny because that was sort of a script that I had sitting around a while ago. But then you also modified a lot of it. So I wouldn't contribute I wouldn't say either of us did like all of it or the majority. I was pretty even.
I got so many comments on that video of people being like, wait, why did you do a new species per generation? Why wouldn't it be, this, that, and the other thing? It's like, look, it's just priming Walker's part where he's like, even if we use population growth rates, you're still not getting enough. It's,
I would have liked the title to be changed from bite-sized to chomp-sized.
I know, but it's bite-sized. My video range is obscene. It could be 5 minutes or it could be 3 hours. So it's bite-sized compared to the 3 hours.
The thing, even on YouTube, we're peer reviewing each other, not just one thing.
There you go.
Walker does something is peer reviewed by Erica and vice versa.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we throw ideas around. Not just me and Erica, but all the YouTube creation busters, quote unquote, throw ideas to each other all the time.
We got the geology guys do so much legwork for me. I mean,
they're so hidden. No one knows who they are. It's sad.
No one knows who they are, and they do so much of the work. I mean, from checking my scripts to giving me sources. I mean, I don't know what I would do for Colton and Denny.
Whatever happened to Anon last year?
He's
I don't know. Mysterious. How mysterious? I don't know. He vanished.
I don't know who that is. Anon?
Corporal Anon. He had a YouTube channel for 30 seconds.
I did that upsets me too much. To talk about, honestly.
Well, that explains why I don't know about him.
He made at least 2 appearances on my channel. He talked about the geological history and
he does all the geology legwork for me.
Dude. Yeah.
If I talk about geology, even Corporal Anon has eyeballed it for sure. All right, cool.
Well, hey, if you guys can, in the private chat or tweet me the links, your paper links and stuff I can put in the description, so I can start putting some sources in my things if you have any.
You got it.
Oh yeah, of course. I'll send you that right now.
Right, and also, you guys want to say your catchphrases that you end your things with?
Oh, thank you for being here, my gentle and very modern apes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a catchphrase. I'm lame.
No, I'm trying to think hard of a catchphrase. Stay ape.
Stay ape. There we go.
As I always say, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.